today. In the room with me today, I have Stephen Dunn, I have Fran McCann, I have the Vice Chair Kelly Armstrong, I have Paul Frew, I have Andy Allen, I have Anya Murphy, and I have Ciara. Where's Ciara? Ferguson. There you go. All very welcome today. We've got a full house, and on Starleaf we have Mark Durkin. So welcome to the meeting today. Can I then first ask members, have you any declaration of interest to do with today's committee? No. Go ahead, Andy.
Charity Trustee, Chair.
Okay, thanks for that, Andy. I'm going to move on then to agenda item 2, which is Chairperson's business. I'd really like to start by welcoming our new member, Ciara Ferguson. You're very welcome. You're joining us, as you've just heard previous, at a very busy time, but I know you've a wealth of experience to bring to this committee as well, so very welcome. Thank you. Good to have you with us. Members, we were due to receive a departmental briefing today on October monitoring round, but we were informed at fairly short notice that this would not take place as the Minister has requested that our officials do more work in the bids ahead of submitting to the Department of Finance. The briefing will now take place at next week's meeting, but I just wanted to put on the record my dissatisfaction with the lateness of the postponement of this briefing, which had been scheduled several weeks previously. Members, as you know, we are now in the committee stages of 3 bills. In order to deal with the evidence sessions, we have provisionally booked room 30 for an extra meeting on a Tuesday morning from 9 a.m. to 10:30 a.m, specifically to deal with oral briefings on the private tenancies bill in the first instance. These extra meetings will start after Halloween recess and will be used only to hear evidence on the bill from 3 groups at each meeting. So if members are agreed that we schedule an extra meeting for this purpose, so given what we've heard in our closed session, I think, okay, members, can I just ask again that this meeting is being set up for the extra meeting to get through the work that we have to go through. I just want people to give that commitment that they will be there for those briefings, and when we are doing them, we're hoping to get 3 witness briefings in that hour and a half, which is tight. So we'll need to be quite regimented in what we're doing. Okay, members, I'll move on then. Yesterday, Kelly Armstrong attended the UC Ulster University launch of their Universal Credit Guidance on behalf of the committee. Kelly, would you want to just give us a few words on how that event went?
Just very briefly, I think it was very appreciated that there was someone there from the committee. We certainly had members there from UCS that had met us before, and quite a few of us before. Fantastic resource, folks. All I can say is take a look at it. UCS now have a claimant's guide to benefits produced online that is available now. There's videos, there's written pieces of information. When they met us in 2020, they did ask for a more personal approach to universal credit. It's in their website now. It's wonderful. I actually said to them yesterday, it's a fantastic resource for any of us that have people going on to universal credit who are migrating across onto universal credit who already are in universal credit. And given the fact that we will have the transition period coming up before 2024, there will be a lot of people moving off legacy benefits. So it's definitely a good resource. So if you just go onto the UCS website, you'll see all the details there. They've done a fantastic job. I did ask a question yesterday at the event to ask, it is an independent piece, it's not Department of Communities, but would this be shared by jobs and benefits officers for anyone or with people? And they said no. So it will be up to us and others to share that information out with claimants.
Okay, no, thank you, Kelly, and thank you for attending the event as well on behalf of the committee. I know that many of us have met with UCS, and they're a phenomenal organisation that really are at the heart of the matter. So I'm glad you were able to go there, and thanks for the update. Members, we're going to move on to agenda item 3, which is the draft minutes. You'll find the draft minutes of the 23rd of September 2021 at page 7. Can I ask members, are you content with the minutes as drafted?
Agreed.
Agreed, thank you. Agenda item 4, matters arising. Members, we've been provided at page 21 with a departmental response in relation to the increase in domestic energy costs. Officials have met with colleagues from the Utility Regulator's Office and Department for Economy to get some more information about the rise in energy prices. Officials from across the department are currently working together to explore options for mitigations against the rising fuel prices. and the resulting impact on the vulnerable. In the meantime, the Department continues to offer a range of support to assist low-income households with rising energy prices, such as boiler replacement scheme, the affordable warmth scheme, and cold weather payment schemes. Members, any comments or content to note? Kelly?
Could we maybe ask the department if there's been any consideration in increasing the levels of those, because there hasn't been an increase in the levels to those other support payments for a wee while. Even with inflation, that might be worthwhile. I appreciate that, you know, the pensioners one that's between £100 and £300 and the other one's £25 doesn't go very far given the hike that's happening.
Yep, nope, certainly we can ask for that. Members, content then, further to note? Paul?
Chair, on that, raising costs is one thing, and it's going to have a massive impact on our most vulnerable. Power cuts is a completely different beast altogether, and expect power cuts, not this winter. There's real danger that over the next 3 to 4 years, winters, there'll be power cuts. So I think we'll have to brace ourselves for the dangers and vulnerabilities that brings. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that with your electrician's head on as well? Yeah. Okay, thanks for that, Paul. Okay, members, you've been provided a page 25 with a response from the Department for the Economy on energy costs. DFE is preparing a new energy strategy on behalf of the Executive for publication in the coming months. One of the key objectives of the new energy strategy will be to ensure that all households and businesses have access to essential and affordable energy to enable a decent standard of living, health and competitiveness. Members, again, any comments, content to note? Kelly?
Yeah, can I just ask, can we find out some information from the department? I was reading one of the housing things that you get through by email. Across in England, they're bringing in a ban on gas boilers. We're not doing that here, and this is part of their environmental impact. So can we get an update from the department on the thinking or what's happening with that energy strategy on this? Because we could be putting into social housing and to housing executive houses gas installations and it ends up being banned. Good money after bad.
So is it the boiler or is it the... I suppose you could all have the question if you want to ask.
Yeah, we can certainly ask those questions. Paul, did you want to come in there? I saw your face. No, fair enough. Okay, we can ask.
I resist the long meeting.
I'll remind you of that later. Thank you. Okay, members, we've been provided at page 26 with a departmental response in relation to the timeline for the sub-regional Stadia programme. Officials have now concluded the refresh and re-engagement exercise. Once the Minister is fully satisfied with the evidence and benchmarking presented, address both the current and future needs of local football, she will update executive colleagues. Following executive endorsement, a timeline for the implementation of the programme will be finalised. Members, any comments on that or the content to note? Andy?
Content to note, Chair, but excuse the pun, it sort of feels as if the department's kicking the ball further down the road at each occasion, so I would just highlight my frustration to the lack of information.
No, thank you. I think if you and Mark you've been reading Mark Durkin's books on puns, Andy. Do you have? Kelly?
I was going to say, yeah, we need to get that update from the department on this. I'm very interested on the money side of things because the money was initially spoke about in 2015. It seems to have disappeared. How much is that going to increase by? Hopefully that will be in the report. And if it's outside this 3-year budget, where is the money going to come from in the future? But could I ask, I know it's sub-regional Stadia programme, but it's part of it. Could we also ask the department for an update on the £33 million underspend and how it's going to be met for Casement Park? I'm just a bit worried about that. Is the GAA, now it's no fault of the department and the GAA, but both of them are facing increased costs, and how is that going to be met? The Minister had talked earlier about, or before, about a business case going forward. Is that going to require additional funding from all the partners, or how's that going to work?
Okay, we can ask that question as well. Sorry, go ahead, Stephen.
Chair, we'd just like to add my concerns in terms of the time scale and the delay in the sub-regional stadium programme. This is set now for over 10 years, and in that time, costs have been raising significantly for clubs right across from the top level locally right through to the more grassroots levels. So there is a real appetite to see progress, and this costs are rising, and the Minister needs to start delivering on this much needed programme right across Northern Ireland.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Brad?
Sure, I think everybody supports the whole concept of sub-regional stadia. I think it's important for local clubs in like all areas of a number of clubs, whether GA or soccer or whatever, that could tap into this. The fact of life is that casement has been there for a long time, that through no fault of people, that it has been delayed and delayed and delayed. It's of crucial importance to the people that live in the West Belfast constituency and further afield across GA and Ulster. And so I do think that what we need to do is to push ahead with this as quickly as possible, as time allows us. So I think it's crucial. You can't park casement for the sake of all, because part of it, the casement came as part of a package to Windsor and also to Ulster Rugby.
Okay, Fra, thank you for that. I think we'll ask those questions around those more information and those timelines. Members, happy we move on? Okay. Members, you've been provided a page 28 with a departmental written response in relation to the Supporting People feasibility study. The draft delivery report has been presented to the Housing Executive Senior Team, who wish to further consider its findings. Consideration will be given to all options. However, an impact analysis has not yet been considered and an implementation plan has not been proposed. The risks outlined in the report must be considered in fuller detail, including any potential risk of destabilising the sector unnecessarily. Again, any comments, members? Kelly, go ahead.
I'm a bit concerned as to what the options are going to be. If it's moving away from grant funding to contracting, or contracting to grant funding, we need to ensure that, as you say, the destabilisation of the sector doesn't happen, because it's the people who are in receipt of the support that will be harmed the most. Plus, we need time to lead into whatever those changes will be. I'd be quite keen to find out from the department or the Housing Executive their planned timeline on this one, to see that we're not letting people down. It used to be that you had to give 12 months notice if you were moving from grant to contract, to allow the people who could apply under a grant to move their position, their company, to a contracting basis, so that they could then apply. So I'd be very keen to find out how that's going to be timetabled in.
Okay, thanks for that, Kelly. I think, again, supporting people has been another one of those issues that's been kicking around this committee since January last year. Many aspects of supporting people, whether that's the budget, whether that's how the process of supporting people is run, or whether the terms and conditions of the people working under supporting people. There's lots of issues there. So I think, again, this is one that we will have to give more work to as well, and actually keep on top of. A bit like when we discussed earlier about PIP and various other issues, because certainly supporting people are doing a job that we as a government cannot do. They're the experts in what they do, so we're very thankful for them for what they do. So yeah, I'm happy enough that if we can keep this one on the boil, definitely. Right, members, content we move on?
Yep.
Okay, we'll move then to page 32 with a departmental response to queries on the SL1, the Universal Credit Childcare Costs Amendment Regulations, Northern Ireland 2021. The committee had asked that the department provides details of the discretionary criteria. Details are provided in the response. Again, members, have you any comments on that? Are you content to note? Was this the one that Mark, you had asked? Is this the one Mark had asked last week for more details on, the SL1?
No, that's a brief
No, that's
answer.
not. That's
Sorry,
different.
Chair.
Sorry, Mark, that's not. It's not. That's later on. Any comments on that, members? Are content to note?
Can I just ask, you see on the third bullet point from the bottom of page, whatever it is, 32, childcare costs are for a child or qualifying young person who's not yet reached the 1st of September following their 16th birthday. Does that apply to all children or children with special needs? Is there a different allowance for those young people?
Okay, we can go back and ask that question. That's fair enough. That's fine. Any other comments? Content to note then? Okay, members, then can move on then to page 34, where you'll find departmental written briefing on its annual report and accounts for 2020-21. Again, members, content to note, or any comment?
Yeah.
Content to note? Sorry, Kelly, go
I
ahead.
have one, page 170, if I could turn, sorry, it's page 170 of their report. What one is that? It's underspend. I just wanted to find out why was there so much underspend on that. You know, it just strikes me. I know we were going through COVID and everything was very crazy, but yeah, it's page 170 actually of our pack. The Controller and Auditor General says in the 2 bullet points in that pace, the basis for opinions, estimated underpayments due to official error, sorry, not underspend, underpayments of 23.8 million. Really? That's an incredible amount of money. And there was fraud and error resulted in estimated overpayments of 166.3 million. That's huge. Just if we could find out a bit more details about those underpayments, whether they have been sorted out, has the official error issue been dealt with?
Okay, can I ask that question? Any other comments, members? Content to move on? Go ahead,
So,
Brad.
it's actually quite interesting because I remember us sitting discussing this very thing with officials 15 years ago, and the same thing. And there was a big drive, rightly so, on fraud, but the biggest difficulty had in the department was the overpayments or underpayments, and
Okay, thank you, Fran. Okay, members, we're going to move on then to page 339 of your pack, where there's a draft committee response to the AERA, the Assembly Executive Review Committee, call for evidence on the Climate Change No. 2 bill. Members, any comments or the content for the response to be sent to AERA? Or that wasn't, that's the, what am I saying, Assembly Executive Review, that's not, that's it. It's the Agriculture Committee, apologies. I don't know what way I read that there. So we're happy we send that through to Department, or the Agriculture Committee, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, fine, thanks. Okay, members, that's matters arising. Thankfully out of the way. We're going to move on then to agenda item 5, which is the Private Tenancies Bill. You've been provided at page 342 with a draft motion to extend the committee stage until the 14th of January 2022. This date is proposed after discussions with the Assembly Bill Office. Are members content to lodge the motion with the Business Committee?
Yes.
Content? Yep, okay.
Just wanted to say, as I said earlier, are we sure that's just giving us enough scope? It might be our target date, but are we just making sure we give ourselves enough time and space? Because whether it's the 14th of January or the 14th of February, we can still finish on the 14th of January. So,
Yeah.
just...
I know the very last date, was it the 28th of January is the last date that we can get an extension to? Janice, just remind us.
Sorry, no, those dates I did put in the motions there based on discussions with Claire McCanny, but I mean, it's up to the committee really if they feel that sounds too tight. But
We are going to be doing the Private Tenancies Bill is the one we're going to be doing on a Tuesday morning.
I do feel we can get through, certainly get through the evidence for the Private Tenancies Bill and meet that January deadline.
And that's what we're going to use the Tuesday morning session for, is just for, in the interim, to look at Private Tenancies Bill. So I think we should get it done before that date. That's just giving us a bit of wriggle room, just in case something's flagged up. Go ahead, Fran.
just amazed that Paul still has so much confidence in the place to be able to deliver by the February, you know. And I still believe that we find a space within the time that we have and have control of, putting it on our finger.
Like, I know this was advice that was given from Claire as well, and the committee clerk has been speaking to her. So we certainly feel, given we have the Tuesday morning space, that 14th of January should be fine. So are members content then that we lodge that motion with the Business Committee?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Members have also been provided at page 343 with a draft signposting ad for the committee's call for evidence. Are you content with the signposting ad as published?
Yep.
Content, thank you. You've been provided in table papers with a draft press release regarding to the call for evidence of the bill, which will be launched on the 5th of October. Again, are members content with that also?
Agreed.
Yeah, okay. You have also been provided then at page 344 with a request from Renters' Voice to brief on the bill. This group were highlighted by members last week, and I think it's important that we hear from this group. So are members agreed with that also?
Absolutely.
Great, thank you. Members, as you know, we requested that a member of RAISE attended the Housing Rights online seminar that took place yesterday on the security of tenure in the private rented sector. Eleanor has advised the clerk that there was discussion and enthusiasm about our call for evidence and views, so we can look forward from what feedback of that to plenty of responses, which is good. So just members, just to inform you of that. Okay, we're going to move on then to agenda item 6, which is betting, gaming, lotteries and amusements amendment bill. That is a mouthful, so it is. We've been provided at page 365 with a draft motion to extend the committee stage until the 21st of January 22. This date has since been updated to the 28th of January since the pack went out after discussions again with the Assembly Bill Office. Okay. So are members content to lodge the motion updated to reflect the new date? So that new date will be the 28th of January for an extension on this bill. Are members agreed that we lodge that motion with the Business Office? Agreed?
Chair, can I just say, picking up on Paul's point, the previous bill, I think the date's right for it. This is the one I'm concerned about because I think that there will be a bit more work on this. We haven't planned our Tuesdays for this bill, but I'm just wondering we might need to have extra time with this one in order to meet that deadline ourselves.
The Tuesdays are flexible. I think that as we go along, then once we get the private tenancies one mopped up, then the Tuesdays will become part of this bill as well. Okay. We've block booked Tuesdays now. They're booked right through. So we got in right and quick there.
Right, we're booked to Christmas.
We're booked to Christmas
at this point in time, but we
need to book beyond Christmas.
We'll get on
There's
that.
Christmas
Yeah.
on.
We'll get on that.
Next Christmas.
Yeah. Chair, if I could just highlight, we will be coming then to the end of the evidence on the Charities bill fairly shortly, so we will go into deliberations on that, and then that will free up time in this meeting to move to the gambling or betting bill. Okay. I think my shorthand is the betting bill. I think that's an easier thing to say.
It is a bit of a mouthful. We do know that when we lodge an extension, we can't lodge a further one. Isn't that correct? So once it's lodged, that's it. That you can't go any further than that. So again, it's just with advice from the Bill Office, asking for the 28th of January. So.
I think, Chair, we're trying to find a balance there between giving us enough time and having a hope of getting it through in the mandate.
Yeah. Okay. Our members agreed then with the date of the 20th of January, and we'll lodge that with the Business Office? Yeah. All right. Thank you. Okay. I have nothing on my screen at the moment. Sorry. What were you? We got our next witnesses in.
I'll just speak to you.
Just take your ease for a moment, members.
We want to do Professor Gareth Morgan's before.
Aye, because he has to finish.
Does he have to finish, if that's okay?
Yeah, that'll do. Okay. Let me just see.
This is agenda item 9, which means
agenda item 9.
Take the Departmental.
Right, okay, members, we're going to bounce you over to agenda item 9 because Professor Morgan, who is joining us for this, is under a time constraint, and we took a little longer than we thought we were going to be in our closed session earlier. So can I then move you into then agenda item 9, and somebody remind me where I am after this. You've been provided with a copy of the briefing paper at page 419. Professor Morgan is presenting to us today and may well reiterate what I'm about to say, but I'd just like to highlight that the Charity Law Association has over 1,000 members of mostly lawyers, but also accountants and other charity professionals, and that the members of the working party established to look at the bill serve in a personal capacity, and the views expressed should not be taken to be the formal opinion of the organisation that they each represent. Similarly, the views in the submission should not be seen as constituting the opinion of CLA members as a whole. So can I welcome Professor Morgan. Gareth, you're very welcome to our meeting today. Can I ask you if you want to go ahead and brief the committee?
Yes, good morning, Chair, and thank you very much for the invitation to speak to the committee. Good morning, members. You've kindly given an overview of the Charity Law Association, and as you know, our submission is prepared by a working party of 5 members, all of whom have specific experience of charity law in Northern Ireland. I wasn't actually chairing the working party, but I was asked to speak to you today because my own background is as an academic, comparing charity regulation across different jurisdictions. And some of the points that we want to make today are about how this bill compares with the equivalent provisions in Scotland, which is where I'm currently based, and in England and Wales. I should add that most of us have made submissions to the independent review of charity regulation in Northern Ireland under Professor Una Breen, so there are broader issues that we believe need to be addressed beyond this bill, but I'll focus on the bill primarily. However, we would just like to make one point, that we do believe it is really important to implement charitable incorporated organisations, the new structure for charities, CIOs, in Northern Ireland as soon as possible. At present, Northern Ireland is very disadvantaged compared to England and Wales and Scotland in not having CIOs. Currently, 2/3 of new charity registrations in Scotland and in England and Wales are for CIOs, or the Scottish equivalents called SCIOs, SCIOs. And some of the difficulties that charities in Northern Ireland are currently facing in registry in terms of difficult constitutions might well be addressed if they could use the CIO structure. It's worth stressing CIOs don't need new primary legislation, so it doesn't actually need anything in this bill. It just needs regulations to be laid by the department to bring them into effect. But I'll focus the rest of my comments on the specific provisions in this bill. As you know, this Charities Bill before you is a very simple bill comprising just 4 clauses, but it aims to remedy some really urgent problems in terms of charity law in Northern Ireland. In terms of clauses 1 and 2, the Charity Law Association Working Party fully supports the principles involved. We agree that it's really urgent to legislate to rectify the omission in the Northern Ireland Charities Act 2008 that didn't allow the Charity Commission for Northern Ireland to delegate decisions to staff, as emerged from the 2019 McBride case. It's now been more than 2 years when the Commission has not been able to take any decisions except through formal meetings of its board. That means a vast number of earlier decisions, including all the charity registration decisions so far, apart from 1 or 2 considered by the full board, are uncertain. So we have the situation 13 years after the 2008 Act was passed, there is still no legally binding register of charities in Northern Ireland. This puts charities in Northern Ireland at an enormous disadvantage compared to those in the UK, elsewhere, or in the Republic of Ireland, where a formal charity register has now been in effect for several years. It also means that the numerous cases where the Charity Commission has given permission for something remain in doubt. For example, if the Commission authorised a charity to amend its objects in order to take on new work, can that charity legally raise funds within its new objects and undertake work under its revised objects? It's not clear. So the Working Party would really urge the Committee and the Assembly to move forward with this bill as swiftly as you possibly can. Every day that it's not on the statute book is enormously damaging for Northern Ireland charities and hence for their beneficiaries and service users. Clause 1 gives retrospective approval to the past decisions, and Clause 2 gives clear powers of delegation for the future. We fully support the principles here. In all charity jurisdictions that I'm aware of, charity regulators have the power to delegate decisions to staff. You can't possibly have a situation where, for example, every charity registration decision has to be taken at board level. However, we do have a few concerns of detail on clauses 1 and 2, which are set out in our written submission. We're not clear why clause 1, subsection 5, omits a whole list of decisions from the retrospective approval process. It would leave decisions on that list in a rather weird position. We feel it would be simpler to omit clause 1.5 so that all decisions taken by the Commission, even if delegated to staff, are regarded as lawful. It's worth stressing that those decisions could still be challenged in the normal way, because clause 1, subsection 7 and 8 create refreshed appeal rights, so anybody would be free to take a new appeal to the Charity Tribunal if they're unhappy. We've also got some slight concerns about clause 2, which suggests that it would be the Department for Communities rather than the Commission that would make the scheme of delegation. That seemed rather bizarre to our Working Party. If the Commission is given the power to delegate, then we feel it must be the Commission board that makes the scheme in consultation with the Department, rather than the other way around. And we also have some questions of detail about allowing some powers to be delegated but not others. But our biggest uncertainty, Chair, is on clause 3. We're all agreed with the broad position that you don't want a situation where very small organisations which never intended to be charities are forced to register under the Act just because their aims could be considered charitable. But on the Working Party, we had a number of different views about how that could best be addressed. And we're not sure about the approach taken by Clause 3 to create a whole system of exempt charities in Northern Ireland. We think that could possibly create quite significant difficulties, which I can expand on if you have time in questions. So whilst we would support the intentions of Clause 3, we would like to discuss other ways forward, and we do have 3 suggestions in our written paper. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Gareth, just before I open it up to members, we have a bit of background information. I don't know where that's coming from. There we go. Seems to have stopped. I just want to ask you then, first of all, you'd mentioned there about the charitable incorporated organisations or CIOs. Is there anything or any recommendations or anything this committee could do at this stage, whether that's in the bill or in recommendations or in our report around that? And then I would actually like you to expand further on the Clause 3. I know that we've had witness sessions and submissions around Clause 3 and about charitable status and those smaller charities and the problems and actually arguments for and against. So just if you could just address both of those points for me, that would be great. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Chair. Yes, on the position of CIOs, it doesn't need any new primary legislation, so it doesn't need anything in this bill. But in terms of your relationship with the department, I'm sure it would be enormously helpful if your committee could make a formal recommendation to the department communities to bring in regulations to implement charitable incorporated organisations without further delay. As I was saying, it does put Northern Ireland at a considerable disadvantage compared to England, Wales and Scotland, where the vast majority of new charities being formed use the CIO structure. In terms of Clause 3 and the smaller charities, we believe there are 2 or 3 issues here. It may be helpful, first of all, to expand on the problem. The issue that has emerged is that because the definition of a charity in Northern Ireland follows a fairly simple definition as used in England and Wales, basically any organisation established with charitable purposes, so if the actual aims of its constitution fall within the charitable headings in the Act, then it is deemed to be a charity. And therefore, because there's no lower limit for charity registration in Northern Ireland, it therefore has to register with the Commission. And what has emerged is there are some very small groups that never really intended to operate as charities, but they've got constitutions which have charitable aims, and therefore they're being forced to register. Now, there are several solutions to this issue used in different jurisdictions. One option would be what's in the bill, which would be to allow these organisations still to be regarded as charities, but not having to register with the Commission. And the bill proposes to do that by allowing some potentially quite complicated regulations to be made, allowing for a category of exempt charities in Northern Ireland. So charities below certain income levels or certain assets would still be charities, but they wouldn't have to register with the Commission. Some of us on the Working Party think that would be good, but others of us do have reservations. Speaking personally, I've got some experience of the system of exempt and accepted charities in England and Wales. And it causes massive problems that an organisation can be a charity, but it's not actually registered with the Charity Commission for England and Wales, and therefore it doesn't have a registered charity number. There's also a whole question about the terminology. If you are going to have this concept, I would recommend you call them accepted charities, which will give a closer parallel with other jurisdictions rather than exempt charities, because an accepted charity is accepted from the requirement to register. Whereas an exempt charity is normally, if you draw the analogy with England, is a body completely outside the main framework of charity legislation. But of course, if you've got bodies which are calling themselves charities but not actually in any way regulated on a day-to-day basis by the Charity Commission, it can cause all kinds of problems. We certainly feel that if you're going to go down that road, it has to be very limited about who could be eligible. But a second solution to the problem is to go down the road which is used in Scotland and in many other jurisdictions, whereby an organisation can have charitable aims, but so long as it doesn't claim to be a charity, so long as it doesn't describe itself as a charitable organisation, it's not required to register with the Commission. So in Scotland, for example, there is a very clear rule, and I think you had evidence from this from Martin Tyson from Oscar a week or two ago, there is a very simple system that every organisation in Scotland which claims to be a charity must be registered with OSCR, but there's nothing to stop a general voluntary organisation that doesn't wish to be seen as a charity having charitable aims. It just mustn't call itself a charity, and that's quite a simple solution. But it would need amending the actual definition of charity in the Charities Act Northern Ireland 2008. The third possibility would be to allow those small organisations which have got charitable aims but never intended to be charities to amend their constitutions in such a way as to make clear they're not a charity, but without having to go through a process of getting the Charity Commission in Northern Ireland permission to do so. So, for example, if you've got an organisation whose objects are to provide some local facility, but they didn't want it to be a charity, all they would need to do would be to add a clause to their constitution. However, nothing in this constitution shall require the organisation to operate exclusively as a charity. Now, provided they were just allowed to add a provision like that to their constitution, they could opt out of charitable status. But that again would need some amendment to the 2008 Act to make that legal, because as it stands, a charity obviously is not allowed to just amend its constitution to become a non-charity without the permission of the Commission. So those are some other ways in which this issue might perhaps be addressed.
Okay, Professor Morgan, thank you for that. I think this is, I will be reading back this Hansard again with great interest. You've given us lots of ideas there around the clause 3, and that the formal recommendation around CIOs is something certainly that we can consider putting into our report as well. So thanks for that. Members, have you any questions for Professor Morgan, Kelly?
I just want to ask Professor Morgan, the status of those charities, the smaller charities, say for instance if it is an organisation with less than 5,000 or 25,000 of an income, the opt-out of charitable status, that would mean then that those could opt in. I'm just thinking of the way that funding streams work in Northern Ireland, that they require your charity registration in order to access those funds. There would be nothing in what you're proposing that would prevent those smaller organisations from actively becoming registered charities. It is an opt-out system.
Yes, thank you for the question. I fully agree with what you're saying. We say very strongly in our written report to the committee that there mustn't be any exclusion of organisations below a certain level from registering with the Commission if they want to do so, for precisely the reason you say, that many funders do require an organisation to be registered charities. And if I can draw an analogy with another jurisdiction, I would strongly recommend Northern Ireland not to go down the route that applies in England, where most charities under £5,000 income cannot get registered with the Charity Commission for England and Wales, even if they want to. Now, that doesn't apply to CIOs, because a CIO doesn't exist until it's registered. So that's one of the attractions of the CIO form. But it's actually very, very difficult for a charity under £5,000 income to persuade the Charity Commission for England and Wales that it wants to be registered. But we say very clearly that any organisation that has charitable aims, no matter what its size, must be allowed to register with the Commission if it wants to do so.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, members, anybody else want to ask any further questions of Professor Morgan? Can I just go back to clause 2 and the power of delegation and the issues around the department there? Could you just go over that again with me one more time about your concerns there with clause 2?
Yes, thank you very much for that. We find it quite curious that although clause 2 is all about allowing the Charity Commission to delegate powers to its staff, it actually says and it does this by inserting a new section 9A into the 2008 Act. Yeah. But this new section 9A subsection 3 says the department may make a scheme describing the delegation details. So it's actually the Department for Communities which is allowed to delegate the Charity Commission's powers. And we think this seems really strange. Any normal framework for any organisation is that the organisation itself works out the scheme of delegation and what powers it wishes to delegate to staff or not. So we would suggest that it would be more logical for that power in this is clause 2 of the bill, section 9A subsection 3, we think it would be more logical for that power to rest with the Commission itself. And we also have questions about subsection 2 of this new section 9A, which says the following may not be delegated, and it lists various powers in the Act that can't be delegated. And again, we think this is slightly odd to propose restrictions of that kind. Clearly, obviously, I'm sure when the Charity Commission for Northern Ireland comes to make its scheme of delegation, it will say certain decisions need to be made at board level, but whether you want to write those sort of things actually into the Act, we think is a little bit strange. It's worth saying, of course, that even quite major powers, like, for example, a decision to open an inquiry, it's not always going to be a clear-cut decision at the board meeting. I can quite envisage a situation, for example, where a charity causing particular concerns comes to the board and the board passes certain resolutions saying to staff, well, please engage with the charity on the following issues, but if you don't get a satisfactory response, we authorise you to open an inquiry. Now, in that sense, the issue has been discussed by the full board, but you might want to delegate the detailed implementation to a member of staff. If you say certain things cannot be delegated at all, you do rather inhibit the way in which things can work, and we feel in some cases it could impose significant delays. Where there's significant wrongdoing with a charity, sometimes you need to act very quickly rather than waiting for the next board meeting.
Okay.
So those are our two issues. One is should the Commission itself be able to delegate, and the second is are the exceptions in Section 9A, subsection 2 really needed?
Okay, thank you for that, Professor Morgan. I think you've left us with plenty of questions that we need to ask of the Department for clarification as to why certain decisions or certain things are in this bill and others that are not in the bill. So thank you for your time today. No other member has highlighted they want to ask any questions at this stage. So look, thank you. As I said, I think this is certainly, when the Hansard comes out on this briefing, it is something that I'll be reading in more detail because there was an awful lot of information there, but I do appreciate that. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, members, that was 9, wasn't it? It was. So we're going too far back now. So we are to, where are we? Agenda item 7?
Agenda item 7.
Okay. Members, we're going to move then to agenda item 7, which is a departmental briefing on the Women in Community Transition Scheme. You've been provided with a copy of the departmental response to the committee queries at page 367, and the departmental briefing paper is at page 369. So can I welcome to the meeting Sharon McCullough and David Sales. Sharon, David, you're both very welcome today. Sharon, I believe it's yourself that's going to brief the committee before we open up for questions.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, committee members. Sorry, there seems to be a little bit just of an issue with some of the audio.
I know we have a bit of background noise going on there, shuffling papers. But we can see you.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, committee members. Thanks for bringing us along today to talk about the WIC programme, following the oral evidence that 2 of the 4 delivery partners provided to you on the 16th of September. I'm David Sales, Community Empowerment Director, and with me today is Sharon McCullough, who is the Senior Manager responsible for the WIC programme. I just want to pick up on some of the information that was provided at the session on the 16th of September and maybe outline the Department's position. In doing so, I do want to highlight that the Department won't always get everything right, and that we are always open and receptive to receiving feedback and making improvements to all of our programmes and our business in a wider sense. The WIC programme itself was launched in September 17, and an 18-month contract was awarded to the 4 delivery partners through to the period March 19. That initial contract was then extended on 2 further occasions, each time by 12 months. So that brought the contract through to March 21. In July of 20, the Executive agreed a 3-year extension to the overall Tackling Paramilitarism programme. That extension due to run from April 21 to March 24. But unfortunately, there was an 8-month delay in securing the budget, principally a delay in securing match funding from the UK government. And unfortunately, budget wasn't confirmed for the extension until the 1st of March 21, which was some 4 weeks before the existing contract was due to expire. So in light of that short notice, Minister Hargey awarded a 3rd contract extension, this time for a 6-month period. And the thinking behind that was in order to ensure that there was no gap in service delivery, and also to allow the delivery partners additional time to prepare for contract ending. That move was in line with CPD advice, which was to confirm that a 3rd contract extension could be awarded on a recommendation that it was awarded for as short as period as possible, and the department moved to getting new arrangements in place as soon as practically possible. So what was an initial 18-month contract turned out to be a 4-year contract. So there's a couple of other things just in terms of the evidence that was presented. There was a bit of a discussion around why the need for a review and what was the department's position on that. I just want to outline that in line with good practice, the department is required to review its programmes to ensure that they're as effective as possible. And given that the Tackling Paramilitarism programme itself was entering into its second phase and that there was a natural break point in the contract, it was appropriate for the department to complete a review to identify any improvements that could be made. And therefore, this decision to review was simply just normal practice. It wasn't anything more than just the department wanting to make sure its programmes were as effective as possible. The review itself was informed by a number of sources, including lessons learned from the overall Tackling Paramilitarism programme, 2 formal evaluation reports on the WIC programme, some informal feedback, including some interviews with community representatives in the affected areas, some live running data, and we also looked into the effectiveness of grant versus procurement. Again, I would emphasise at this point, in retrospect, the department acknowledges that we could and perhaps should have done more to involve the current delivery partners more fully in the review. And I apologise if that has left the current delivery partners with a perception that they're undervalued by the department. And that's not been the case, and certainly departmental officials and minister are on record in terms of the contribution that the current delivery partners have made to the programme to date. There's some information around contract management and how the department managed the contract. I just want to outline the department has a responsibility to ensure that public money is effectively managed, and in all instances that requires sight of key performance information. My part of the department manages over 300 similar contracts, and they're all managed to the same standard and in the same manner. I'd also like to maybe emphasise that any information we were seeking from delivery partners was all aimed at improving delivery for women on the ground. In terms of the new programme itself, it's never envisaged that the WIC programme would provide long-term support or training to the same cohort of women. Instead, it was intended that women would graduate from the programme equipped with the knowledge, skills and confidence to take on leadership roles within the community and maybe go on to undertake further training or education opportunities. The new programme itself has not changed significantly from what has gone before. Probably the most important difference from our point of view is that this new programme will be bespoke and tailored for individual areas and delivered by local organisations, so therefore based more fully on the needs of each local area. There was some conversation about the areas that were being targeted as part of the new programme, and again it's maybe worth just highlighting that the new programme will work off current PSNI statistics to identify and prioritise the locations for the area of the new programme. And that's using basically the number of recorded paramilitary related incidents per ward. To assure the committee, again, there's some concerns about the quality of the new programme. The new programme will be piloted. It will also be overseen by an advisory group just to make sure, again, that any improvements that can be identified will be implemented. In closing, just want to pick up, there were a number of instances in which the evidence presented questioned the professionalism of the team, including examples such as the team only being interested in spreadsheets, members hadn't read evaluation reports, and we most importantly weren't interested in the women themselves. I just want to ensure the committee that my team, my team, and in particular Sharon McCulloch, is someone who lives and breathes community development and who over a prolonged period has made a significant contribution to the community that she serves. And I'm sure that there's members of the committee who have had dealings with Sharon that can attest to that. So I just want to pick up that we are a professional team and fully cited on the importance of this programme for women in development. In closing, I also want to pay tribute to the work of the current delivery partners for their contribution to the WIC programme over the last 4 years. It's clear that the programme has made a significant impact and that has provided an excellent foundation which can be further built upon as we enter the second phase. So I hope that helps, and I hope the written briefing helps, and I'm happy to answer any questions in detail at this point.
Thanks, David, and thank you, Sharon, for being with us today. It's just very concerning that TWN felt that they had to come, had to contact MLAs, and I agreed that they came in front of this committee to have this issue raised. And I think you've said it yourself, communication between you and TWN wasn't at its best at the best of times as well. So I get that and I understand that. What was more concerning for me on the evidence that I did hear, as someone who has championed the women, championed the empowerment of women, and I'm wanting to see women succeed in any shape and any form in their life. It was very concerning.
I'm sorry, but the audio was so poor that I can't. I'm not sure if Sharon can pick it out. It's an issue on my end, but I really can't hear every other word.
Hold on 1 minute, just Antoinette, what were you saying there? Do you think it's Sharon's audio that's causing it?
There's somebody in your background, David. As somebody who wears hearing aids, I can actually hear somebody else in their office coughing and speaking and moving chairs, and there's a window open somewhere.
Bear with us. Okay, we've just muted Sharon. Sorry, Sharon, we've just muted you to see if that was going to make a difference. So that has that made a difference, David? Can you hear us a bit clearer?
Yes.
No, I was just okay.
Apologies.
I was just saying there that for me it was really concerning as someone who there's background again. So it's not Sharon. Hold on, Antoinette. Sorry. I've just muted her again. Okay, right, we're going to give this another go, and hopefully I'll not have to repeat myself a third time. You're all right. It's just very concerning for me as a female and someone who has championed women and women's rights and women's empowerment for many, many years, that we saw a really worthwhile, a really successful project, which was actually quite a high-level project, that had been rolled out and had helped so many women, coming to an end the way it did, but not just coming to an end, but being the way that the delivery partners and more importantly the women were left with not knowing the way forward. I think that was pretty bad. I think, as I know, communication at times was not great, and you've admitted to that, and that's fair enough and that's fine. So it's just that it's just on the way forward for this programme. As you'd said, we're now in phase 2 of tackling paramilitarism. The problem is still out there. It's still facing our communities. In fact, in many communities, it's actually getting worse. And women pay the price quite often, more often than enough when it comes to these issues. Yep. So I just want you to assure me that any new programme, and it was said when TWN were in, that this may be seen as a softer approach or a softer programme, because that's not what women need. They don't need some soft programme. They need a programme that is worthwhile. They need a programme that leads to a point, that leads them on to something else. So it's just your assurance around that, because I would have concerns about that. And also about then where the delivery of this and the delivery through different organisations, and just the level of ability those organisations have to roll out such a specific programme as tackling paramilitarism, because it's not every organisation that can roll out that programme. And also then I would have concerns around how you're going to target those areas. You'd said there through PSNI stats. Many of us will know that as constituency representatives that we have areas within our own constituencies that are small pockets, that are not seen maybe as areas that are controlled massively by paramilitarism, but we know that that is happening. And the stats might not just reflect that. So we would be keen as a committee, and certainly I would be keen to learn sooner rather than later actually where those areas are that have been identified through PSNI statistics, because as a constituency representative, that is not always representative of what is actually going on in our constituencies. So just if you could answer any of those or make comment on any of what I've said.
Sure. So I think overall, as I said there, the programme itself is not entirely different. There are some differences. The biggest one of which is that it will be more localised and more bespoke. I'll bring Sharon in a minute in terms of some of the detail around that. But from our point of view, it's a very similar programme. And as I say, focusing maybe more on the needs of the local areas and giving organisations the opportunity to flex the response based on how paramilitarism is affecting or blighting their community in particular, and the impacts of paramilitarism can be different in different communities, and I think this approach will allow a better tailoring of our response.
Can I just
In terms of
come
maybe
in?
some of the other-
Sorry, David, can I just come in on that point? I mean, I could name, and I'm not going to, and I'm sure many members around this table could think of groups that have been around for a considerable number of years, or who have been delivering programmes in our community that actually have not been delivering them well. And that would be a concern, that certain groups end up with a programme on tackling paramilitarism that are not equipped to deliver that programme, and because they've been around for a certain length of time, or they tick all of the boxes, then they become the delivery partner. That is a real worry that many people have out there. That certain groups will receive this money to deliver this programme. So it's just, I want you to just take that concern under your notice as well, because I can say if it's happened, if I have that concern in my own area, I am sure others have the same concern in their areas.
Yeah, I'm certainly happy to take it under notice and give you assurance that there will be mechanisms to monitor performance, including, as I say, some pilot and an advisory group to oversee it. But maybe if I bring Sharon in just at that point in terms of maybe some of the detail of the questions, Chair, that you asked around the areas.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, good morning everyone. The first question about the areas, Paula, we have a list that is clearly outlined on the website. It was PSA and PSNI figures that we used. It was the same process that was used in the original plan. It's just that the areas have changed because, as David outlined earlier, it's 4 years since the initial, consultation that everything has done. And I do take your point that there's areas that are, not recognised because there's unreported crime, so that's never going to be kind of acknowledged. So we're relying on the local community to actually factor that in their proposals, because you may have, I know locally here there's an area in Craigan that would always be saying, why are we branded as a bad area, because people are being taken there to get shot from, the wider city area. So it kind of, moves the statistics in a certain way. So we have to be mindful of the actual position that's out on the ground. And we will share the details of the areas with the committee. That's not a problem. With regard to the standards, Minister was very clear about, questioning that as well, because she wanted to be assured that there was consistent training facilities, to be involved. So we would be hopeful that whatever training is coming through for, the organisations that apply, they're using robust standardised training, from existing organisations that are on the ground. And again, back to David's point about the bespoke, we are here concerned about the women and their development, and that's basically the core aim of the project, get them developed and hopefully empower them to continue, building on the existing women that have completed the programme, taking their learning and seeing where we go to actually affect change in our local community.
I just have a concern that we're taking a step backwards. We all know that there are gatekeepers within all of our communities across the board, no matter which community that might be. It happens everywhere. And I am concerned that gatekeepers will take control of any type of tackling paramilitarism programme. And, I just don't want to be back here, if I am back here, heaven knows, in a year's time, where we're looking at a review of this and we see that actually that the gatekeepers have taken control and the money has not been spent in the way that it should have been spent in tackling paramilitarism. I mean, this is so different to so many other projects and so many other funding streams that go out from the Department of Communities. This is a very different type of funding, and I've just got major concerns. Look, I know that there are other members who want to ask. I don't want to hog this. I've got Kelly, I've got Andy, and then I've got Mark, and if anybody else wants to let me know. I'm going to go to Kelly if you want to make comment or ask questions.
Thank you, David and Sharon. I'm going to ask a few quick questions first. You've talked about there was delivery review reports done. Is there any possibility that those delivery review reports could be shared with the committee? And you talked about the lessons learned, if there's a report that includes those lessons. So that's that. The other thing I wanted to ask you about is the end of contract process. The original process for WICT, it was a contract. It was for 18 months. At the end of that contract, I would be very it's normal for the end of a contract to have a 3-month period at the end where the actual delivery on the ground finishes and the partner provides a report summarising the outcomes and the details and completes any statistics. Given the fact that this contract was extended 3 times, I'm just wondering when that 3-month part of the contract was built in to give you the feedback from the partners that would normally be requested. So there's that part. So it's quite practical, those questions. So I'll ask all this together and then you can come back if you don't mind. Politicians do this all the time to people. So I'm interested about the contract process, that notice period. To be honest, I would be looking, if it had been me out in the community and voluntary sector, I'd have been looking at legal assistance for this, because I'm not sure from what I've heard so far that the partners have been given the appropriate notice on the contract. But let me know on that. I may be wrong. As David, I think it was you said that the programme, that was originally intended 4 years ago, it was a contract that started out 18 months and was extended 3 times. Having been in that situation in the community and voluntary sector myself, I don't know how the group had patience with you. I know that they wanted to continue to deliver the programme, so they took the extra extensions there. But how possibly can a programme like this develop if the partners are left hanging, with these short-term, extensions happening? So that has me concerned, and I want to find out from yourselves about the lessons learned. The new programme, I need you to convince me that this isn't a programme that's removing from what was before just towards the numbers game. So having been involved with developing women for years, 4 years is a drop in the ocean for how long it takes to develop women. Women aren't people who you just put into a course and magically overnight they become, they have to be built on, the confidence has to be engendered. And given what we're talking about, paramilitarism within communities, those women need long-term support. So can you convince me that this new programme is not about numbers through the doors in as many different areas as possible in order to spend the money as far as possible across Northern Ireland instead of building women as peace builders? And can I ask you, this change that is happening, what assertion can you give this committee that this is not going to play into paramilitary power in communities? Because at a time when we have built up women over a period of 4 years who have had that support from the WIC partners, that they're coming away from that. The WIC partners may or may not go forward to apply for this funding, if it's a grant or whatever. But does that not just allow paramilitaries then to step in where those women are no longer going to be there, that they no longer have the support? It leaves them isolated in their communities. And can I ask as well, I'm sorry, there's a lot of questions here, but it all ties in. On the development of the new programme, can you confirm what co-design with the public was used? I know you said you spoke to women, but the fact that the partners weren't included, it sort of smacks a wee bit strange. I'm involved in many women's groups, and I have never heard tell of that co-design coming out and asking what women wanted or what women needed within communities. So there's a lot there, but over to you to convince me that this is the right way to go.
Okay, Kelly. So I suppose first, I think your first point was around making available some lessons learned and reports in the programme, and we're very happy to take an action point and do that.
Thank you.
I think your second point, and maybe a couple of associated points in and around the contract and the notice period. And the programme has been operating on annual budgets, which drives some of the contractual arrangements around the programme as well. So even though the overall tackling paramilitarism programme has been extended for 3 years, we're still operating off annual budgets, which gives us an issue to manage in terms of that.
But can I just ask, David, that confuses me, because the first contract was for 18 months, irrespective of your budgets. The legal contract was for 18 months. So I'm concerned at how, on a normal contract paperwork, you would see, right, there's a start, there's a middle, there's the delivery, and then there's the end. So irrespective of where the funding was coming from, there was a legal contract in place. I would love to find out just that end, that notice period, that finish to the contract, what it was like.
Kelly, can I just
bring Sharon in just in terms of the notice periods? Go ahead, Sharon.
Yeah, sorry, there's normal standard contract conditions that have been agreed through the contract term. I think it's section 23 of the contract. CPD have provided the advice, and the partners have signed off to the contract. Each extension was an extension of the original contract, so the same terms and conditions would have continued, Kelly. So it's basically a matter of managing the contract position. So it's up to the partners and working with themselves to make sure we bring this to a close. You know, with the extension period, we've been conscious of making sure that there's a proper evaluations and follow through the process. We had intended to raise this yesterday at our regular checkpoint meeting just to kind of finalise the details. But unfortunately that meeting was cancelled. So we will be taking it forward. They fine-tune the details. I have inherited this contract. You know, it was initiated prior to my time, so I'm trying to follow through on whatever the contract conditions are and in the best interest of everybody.
Yeah, no, I just would be very keen. Normally at the end of a contract period, whether it's at the start, even if it's been extended, there is a very clear end of contract process. And I'm just wondering, I know that the extensions are there, and to be honest, when I worked in the community and voluntary sector, I would have took your arm off for every extension I could get. But at the end, there was always that, right, the tidy up time, and that would then be used by whatever department for future planning. I'm just keen to find out, because it seems to me that the current partners are cliff edging. They're coming off, you know, they're cut off today, is the end of their contract.
The 30th was, yes, the end date. You know, in normal contracts, you would have the rollover, Kelly, of what it is, because you would have your invoices to be submitted, finalising all of your claims. You know, there would have to be a bit of a lead-in time. So we really are right to the wire to try and get this finalised, and it'll be in the best interest of everybody to try and keep that, you know, in tandem with what the contract conditions are. We have queried about, you know, the valuation report, because that again was supposed to be completed for the end of the period on the 31st of March. So we've been assured by the partners that that has been extended to make sure that the extension period also can feed into the findings that come through. So again, that will be post the 30th of September. And again, as soon as we agree those timelines with the partners, I'm happy to provide further details to yourselves.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Oh, there's a load more of my questions there, just
Haven't
about.
answered. Okay,
yeah.
sorry, Kelly, go ahead.
You know, when you know, about the is this a programme within the numbers?
And the current WIC participants. So yeah, from our point of view, certainly it won't be a numbers game. You know, we're as committed to anyone to women's development, and in terms of the current participants, we would hope that they would start to put that kind of learning into practice and make that contribution within their communities. And the intervention forum is another part of the legacy of the current programme, that we would hope those kind of structures and arrangements would help continue on beyond the first phase and into the second phase, in terms of helping new participants go through their training and make a contribution to their communities. So it's all part of a package, even though it's kind of segregated into a first phase and a second phase. They're all a cumulative effort to tackling paramilitarism.
And what about the comment that I was asking about, does this play into paramilitary power? Because what we're doing is we're leaving those women who've gone through the WIC programme, you know, because they've been through so much, you know, and many of them have either finished or are part way through the current WIC programme. So they've been working within communities to try to handle this paramilitary situation. What's happening with those guys then? Are they just left there? What support will be still available?
Sorry, it would be our intention that each of the participants have an individual, you know, development plan as part of the programme. So we would be hopeful that they would then make themselves available for, you know, going forward, whatever groups are identified, even new recruits, providing early mentoring responsibilities. The intervention forum has been, you know, a fantastic legacy of the current project. I met the ladies and you know, they were brilliant. Their experience is second to none. So we want to maximise on that opportunity. We don't want to see any women left. What we want to see is getting people integrated within the community and see where that path takes them on their journey and ensure that they're supported. So our intention would be to make sure that they're well aware of whoever's coming forward in the, you know, the new round, that they can, you know, get integrated where possible.
Yeah, I think just from my point of view, I'm disappointed that I don't see it, that the co-design of the new programme hasn't already built them into it. But that's my questions. I know there's others who want to ask questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly. I've Andy and then Mark. Andy?
Thanks, Chair. And just the outside, I'd like to place on record, as I've done so in the past, my frustration, because I do know David, and I'm sure you probably didn't like see my email pop into your inbox, but I would say the information flow that I received as an elected rep fell short of what I expected in relation to the wider programme, and I'm sure from engaging with TWN and the other delivery partners, they share that viewpoint, so I just want to place that on record. Just very quickly, can you confirm the original length of the contract?
It was from September 17 to March 19.
No problem. And in terms of the extensions, you mentioned engagement with CPD. Can you share with us the direction that CPD give in relation to each extension? And also, can you just clarify, I think Sharon had said there were no changes to the contract at each extension point?
Sharon, can I bring you in there in terms of, I'm not sure if you mean share verbally today or share the actual advice from CPD subsequently?
Subsequently, whatever works.
Yeah, well, we're happy to share what you need. As I say, I inherited this programme, so I've only been involved in the extension period up until March 21, and then the current extension. We continued with the contract standard that it was, plus the service level agreement, and there was some further tweaks made this year for just the extension period, because there was 2 tweaks there was current participants, plus there was another cohort of women that were brought on as new participants. So we were just looking for further detail under the service level agreement for the breakdown of spend and stuff like that there. But it was all completed in negotiation with the partners and agreed back through CPD. So look, as David said at the very start, we've tried to keep everything as streamlined and consistent with what the previous process was, but definitely happy to share whatever information you need.
Okay, sorry, I'm struggling to hear your feed. There was no change to the contract at any point?
There was a slight minimal change at the last extension period. The partners were looking for confirmation of whether it would be superseded or not, was superseded the previous one. So again, we were looking for CPD advice, and that tweak was added on at the request of the partners. Okay,
I thought you said previously, and I stand to be corrected, there were no changes whatsoever.
No, I said we maintained consistency with the contract that was there.
Okay, I'll have a listen back to this and double check that and come back, but I thought you'd said there were none. So also you'd mentioned 4 years since the original consultation on the programme. What consultation has there been in advance of rolling out this programme with stakeholders and the wider community?
I suppose, Andy, the first point is that there's a lot of, as Kelly indicated earlier, the delivery reports. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you. Go ahead, Sharon.
Yeah, so we have delivery reports that are presented by the partners in advance of every checkpoint meeting, which is every 6 weeks. And we were given information, and there's opportunities for any issues to be identified. So we were basically taking that as feedback from partners. We worked having conversations with key stakeholders across the community just to get feedback on, their perception of what women were saying on the ground, what they would like to see, and basically taking that on board, and the information in your briefing pack, just the key findings. And other than that, it was anecdotally when we were speaking to the intervention forum, and they had a meeting with our minister, where they were kind of feeding back on the programme, the success of it, and what possible issues there were. So again, we took on recommendations from the evaluation reports. There was SENI reports, there was S3 solutions, and then there was an additional report that Lisa Byrne had done on behalf of the partnership. So again, it was trying to tie in whatever the recommendations and findings were.
Okay, thanks, Sharon. In terms of the evaluation reports, who carried those out?
There was independent evaluations done by SENI in the first phase, and there was 2 reports they presented, and then S3 solutions have been procured by the project partners most recently, so they have completed an interim evaluation, and we're waiting on the final evaluation, which is what I referred to earlier, and that'll be agreed now, hopefully, for after the end of this contract period.
And those independent evaluation reports, were they shared with everybody, including the delivery partners?
it was the delivery partners that procured them, Andy, and shared them with ourselves.
Okay, and in terms of feedback to delivery partners on the delivery of this wider programme, did the department share any concerns they had or didn't have in relation to the wider delivery?
No, look, we've had open and frank conversations with the partners at every checkpoint meeting. You know, we are keen to make sure that the delivery continues for women, and you know, are happy with the processes that were there. The women, the partners were explaining to us all the women and the intervention, you know, how some were progressing, and you know, it's clear to see some women progress further than others. So we've had open discussions at checkpoint meetings on the progress of the programme.
No, I appreciate that, and just I'm struggling to understand how the department's viewing the wider programme through those checkpoint meetings, etc., and that of what we've heard from the delivery partners is so different. I'm just struggling to reconcile that. In terms of the change between the programme in terms of contract and grant, can you outline the wider rationale for that? You know, what evaluation was done, and why do you feel A is better over B in terms of contract and grant?
I suppose, Andy, we had another objective under the Tech and Power Multisim programme. We had to do a piece of work under procurement, guidance, you know, bureaucracy and governance. I've had experience of both contract and grant aid. My main experience and contract is through capital projects, so this is the first one that was really through revenue, but it's the same process. You have your aims and objectives, you have financial management, normal project management and follow through, same as grant aid. For the sake of this project, you know, we were coming close to a tight turnaround. It was going to be, initially in July, we thought we were getting 3 years funding. It was changed to 1 year. It was quite difficult to get a tender out on an annual basis. We considered all of the options and came up with the proposal that the grant aid would be the more practical solution in the circumstances.
Okay, and can you share the work the department done in relation to that? There'll obviously be evaluation work in relation to the two options, as you say, the time frames and to get tender documents out. Can you share all of that with us, please?
I'll check, Andy, and confirm what Kim shared.
Okay, okay. And in terms of the tailored approach to where the programme will be delivered, I think in answer to the Chair and Kelly, you had obviously said that that's going to be predominantly based on PSNI statistics, and as we all know, unfortunately that often goes unreported, so there will be a gap there. What of the current programme will factor in that? Will there be any learning from that in terms of the tailoring of the programme?
You know, the tailoring of the programme, we've tried to keep the modules fairly consistent with what the existing ones is. It's all about developing the women, and the extra tailoring is basically to make sure that the women are involved right from the outset, taking on volunteering roles, getting integrated within their community. So it's nearly like a work in progress and training at the same time, if that makes sense.
Yep. And in terms of the training, will there be any change in the accreditation of the programme?
Again, and it was through the conversations that we had through the partners, you know, sometimes it was accreditation was very highly valued, and other times we were told it shouldn't really matter, it depends on what the women's needs are, so we took that on board. So which is why we have left it open that whenever the groups are liaising with their participants, that it is very bespoke and it's individual to that person. You know, some of the feedback that we had got was that in other programmes the participants give them their own individual budget and they have the power to kind of manage their budget. It's something that, you know, we wanted to be as open and transparent as we possibly could to kind of get the best for the participants in the longer term. So I would anticipate there will be some that will be accredited and some that may not. It will definitely depend on the individual needs.
Do you want to come in there, Kelly?
I'll come in after, Andy, if that's okay with the Chair. Yeah.
I just thought you wanted to come in at that point. Okay. In terms of the delivery partners had highlighted their concern in relation to the WIC dashboard and how it had been changed and how that then was presented in terms of, so for example, if I as an MLA asked a written question, I would get a different output as to the reality. When was that changed and what was the rationale for that change?
The dashboard was in place before we came on plate and they taken responsibility for the programme. The dashboard clearly outlines the different modules that the women were undertaking. We didn't change that. It was more just making sure that it was more fine-tuned. The dashboard is there outlining individual modules to give an overall view of who completed what module where, and it was more like to use as a form of progression planning for the participants. In addition to that, there's a progress report, and I know there was comments made the last time about not giving the opportunity to determine that you could only report when people completed the full programme. That's factually incorrect, because you can kind of see who completed, or the numbers that completed module 1, 2, 3 or 4, but there was also an opportunity to provide some anecdotal evidence on, if people were struggling, if, particularly through COVID, there was flexibility given to ensure that there was more one-to-one intervention. So that should have been documented within the progress element of it. The dashboard was amended last August, but it was all discussed in relation with the partners who agreed it. There was basically better refinement of the dashboard, and it was the contractor had looked at their systems and wanted to kind of say what they could pull the information out easier to kind of report on. So it was more to make it an easily accessible and usable tool. I don't know why there was an issue made with it, because it was fully discussed with the partners and agreed with them, for the change that was made.
Okay, so you're saying you're satisfied that if, in terms of reporting of the programme, you've been able to see, we could have got the information to show how many participants were at the programme, not as was outlined to us?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you can imagine in a spreadsheet, Andy, that we had the areas. Each of the 4 partners had their specific breakdown of areas, and then to the right-hand side you would have had the different modules, and it was basically having a total of what their cohort was, and if you had 10 of a cohort and 5 had done module 1, 5 had done module 2, 3, 4, and then 10 had done their module 5, then you knew that one had been a better uptake than the other, and it was just kind of, it's managing the programme and seeing where, the extra intervention has to be provided, they follow through the full completion of the project.
Okay.
And if it would be helpful, we're happy to share a copy of the dashboard, just to sort of put in context what Sharon has just said.
Yeah, no, I'd very much welcome that, David. Thanks very much. You mentioned in your opening remarks a advisory panel. Can you outline the makeup of that advisory panel and how each individual was selected?
I'll come on here if that's okay. Basically, again, like the current programme, there is an advisory panel in place. Minister has been key to confirm that she would like to give some advice because of her intervention in the women's sector, to make sure that we have appropriate people there. So we haven't got the advisory panel set up as yet, and again we're waiting on the closing date of the current application process being out, but we would hope to have that identified very soon, and we'll share the details.
Okay, can you share the details of the previous advisory panel as well, please?
I'm sorry, Andy, I don't know if that was something that was managed by WIC, but I can follow it up with you.
Appreciate that, Sharon. And overall, has the department compiled a learning document in terms of moving forward? And if they have, which I would like to hope they have, can we see a copy of that?
Yeah, we can pull forward any lessons learned, yeah.
And I think there's one question I left off here. You remarked, both have remarked during your presentation, that there are minimal changes between the 2 programmes. Can you put together a succinct document for us which outlines the 2 programmes and clearly annotates the changes, please?
Yes, happy to do that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks. That's me, Chair.
And just before we finish, just like to pick up on the series of emails that you did send to me. There were 4 in total throughout the kind of March, early April period, and I think, as you know, all of those emails were acknowledged and sent to Minister's office because at that stage Minister was considering proposals for the future of the programme. So that would hopefully explain, maybe not satisfactorily, but it will explain what happened to those emails?
No, I certainly appreciate that, David, and I wasn't saying that you didn't acknowledge them. What I'm saying is the information flow of the information that I asked for wasn't forthcoming, and certainly wasn't forthcoming at the pace in which we should have expected. And the pandemic was certainly articulated as I'm hesitant to say excuse, but it nearly was that at the time. I'll leave it there, Chair. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Andy, Kelly, did you want to come in to point there before I bring Mark in?
Just very quickly, just on the discussion, just forgive me, David and Sharon, but the numbers game has me tormented with this. The dashboard is a numbers game. It doesn't tell me anything about the outcomes of those women. So, whatever course one is, what did the women learn from that? And the partners have been able to do that. But one of the questions I wanted to just check with you on the contract versus grants that Andy had brought up. Contracts are set out in advance with clear targets that the department sets for the contract deliverer to meet and to deliver. And if they don't deliver that, then you can break the contract. A grant is something very different. The provider applies for a grant using their own terms. It's much more flexible. The department can change things at short notice. Can I just ask, is that the reason why it's moving from contract to grant? Because it sounds to me like whenever August happened and the dashboard changed, that there was that many changes happening on a softer level within that contract. It should have been a grant all along. It actually sounds like the WICT was a pilot as opposed to actually a contract. I'm just wondering, is that one of the main reasons why it's moved to grant, that the department needs more flexibility to be able to change this project rather than giving it to a provider just to run with?
No, I can guarantee, Kelly, that it's not been changed from contract to grant because of that reason. Mainly, we want to have a bit of flexibility for the delivery of the action of the Tackling Power Medicine programme. There has been the continuation of the current programme, the contract. We've tried to manage that in the best way that we possibly can, and it was just from feedback we were requested to have more localised intervention, and that was kind of the key thing that was coming through from all of the feedback that was given, added to the fact that we have a short-term level of funding and a time period. We wanted to move towards that direction.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Can we bring in?
Can I just qualify, Kelly, about the point about the numbers game? The dashboard is a numbers game. It's one document as part of the reporting pack. The progress report goes hand in hand with it, and that is where the mechanism for the qualitative data can be provided. We had asked for examples of case studies just to provide further evidence. We are having to put the wider executive programme for the continuation of the programme. We have to do quarterly reports to the programme team. We're looking to fine-tune the detail that we could provide.
Having worked in the community and voluntary sector and spending up to 40% of my time putting reports into departments, I know exactly what those reports are like. It's just this outcome-based, what we're trying to achieve with outcome-based. The numbers can tell you how many people have completed, but it's actual on-the-ground differences. I'm just concerned. People talk about, we want this in our local community. It's how effective it will be in the long run. But I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Kelly. Can we bring Mark in, please? Mark, you there?
Thanks, Chair, and thank you to David and Sharon. A lot of points have been made that I was going to touch on, so I won't rehash them, or at least I'll try not to. I was going to say to the officials that they'd got a hard time the last day when they weren't here, but I think it's fair to say they've got a harder one today when they are. It is good, however, to get that side of the story, or the department version of events. And I know David has acknowledged there are some areas where more could have been done in terms of engagement with TPA in the review. However, I still kind of get the hunch that there's something that we're not being told here in terms of maybe concerns that the department has or has had. like, I know Sharon, you says there that there have been frank and open discussions at checkpoint meetings. What was the need for the frankness? You know, are there issues that have been flagged up? Now, whenever the partner organisation was on that they made a point of saying that there'd never been any complaints from the department. I'd asked if there'd been any complaints made to the department. It was a fairly innocuous question, to be fair. Since then, I have been contacted by a group, I have to say, in my own constituency, who were even more scathing about that organisation than they were about you as a department. I've advised them actually to write to committee to outline their experience, because while I definitely don't dispute what other members have said from their experience and knowledge of how well this project or programme might be working in their areas, that certainly isn't the experience in mine. So just in terms of a question, Sharon, I suppose it was you who says about the frank discussions. Are you at liberty to go into any more detail on that? I'm just thinking, because for the Minister to make the decision that she has made, knowing her commitment to the empowerment of women, there must have been some compelling evidence for her to go down this road.
Mark, I suppose, I'm not aware of any formal complaints. Frank discussions, at the end of the day, if there's a minor change, and sometimes that can escalate into a massive problem for some people. In this circumstance, I was looking to just make sure that we as a team could manage the project in the best way we possibly could. At the start, there was very minimal information and evidence kind of given through, the information of, what is the delivery on the ground, back to Kelly's point of, what's happening out there, who's being helped or whatever. So that's where we brought in the introduction of case studies. Now, we were met with a bit of resistance in that, and we basically just says, look, we appreciate their sensitivities. It's a very, very delicate, programme that we're working on here. But let's get some information, basically, even if it's, small anecdotal kind of comments back from the participants of how they've improved. It was simple things like that. Other things was just tightening up on, just financial management of the project and the contract. We were to be provided with appropriate spend. That was never coming through, regularly. I would have had anticipated that at regular meetings you would have had, like in most projects, an update on spend and profile and stuff. So it was just stuff like that we were tightening up on, and that's what has been put in place as part of the discussions, and again the monitoring. It's very critical. As civil servants, we're responsible for managing public money, so we want to make sure that the outcomes are being achieved. At the start of this contract, the main outcome is that 500 women are engaged. So basically the numbers game is there, but like Kelly, I'm more interested in kind of seeing the anecdotal and the qualitative information and the actual experience. So that was part of the process, Mark, and if that has caused a bit of discontent, we've had to manage it, in the best way that we can, and I think we are in a better place with the partners because of that, because we were able to, put the bid on in September to secure the funding for, from the programme, to secure continuation of delivery for women on the ground, which I think is a great feat, you know what I mean? So to me, we have to progress. If there's something that needs to be addressed, then we address it and move on.
Thank you, Sharon. So just sorry for taking you back there. So did the department have concerns around financial management?
No, there just wasn't information provided to us, Mark. We place reliance on the delivery partners to manage the process and manage the contract. So basically, we just wanted to have the assurance that was in place.
No, well, I think the programme or the idea, is very important, and it's a very important piece of work, and it's important that it's done right and done well to maximise its effectiveness and the number of women it can help, and I suppose by consequence the number of communities that it can help. I know you've been talking there about other organisations or local organisations. I think it is appropriate, I suppose, to get the organisations best placed to reach those people and places that are hard to reach, but other members have outlined that that's not exactly without risk either, in terms of potential dare I say, paramilitary coercive control in communities, and sadly the non-paramilitary gatekeeping that's evident in some other communities. But it is good to have that flexibility. But I was wondering what sort of engagement there would be with maybe Department of Justice and TAO through their experience and communities in transition and stuff, and some of the programmes that they've rolled out, and how effective they've been just when it comes to use identifying new delivery partners for this, potentially delivery partners.
Well, Mark, we're part of a consortium. It's called the One Team under the Tackling Paramilitarism programme. So you have like Education Authority, you have TEO, you have Justice. Justice is actually the project lead for the team. So we would have regular meetings outlining kind of, what our programme is. And again, this is where we were looking for the evidence of what was delivered in the programme, so we could, speak robustly on what the position was for the projects that we were managing, and on top of that, we were able to, expand a wee bit more on the likes of the family support and stuff, because I've spent more of my time attending justice meetings than what I have Department for Community meetings in this past year. So, and again, it ties in because you've got all your community safety meetings, all of those different structures, and it's important that we all make these links, and I would say that we're probably better linked up now because we're more informed, and there's a lot of collaboration and sharing the learning again there. So there is cross communication, I suppose, at a range of levels of what the programme is and what can be achieved.
Thanks, Sharon. And there was one issue, I'm just trying to read my scribbles here. I think it was yourself, Sharon, you'd referred to a new cohort having been brought into the training. I was just wondering when that happened.
That was during the extension period. Mark, you'll be aware that Minister had granted the 6 months extension. So thankfully the current partners had a waiting list of participants. Minister was very conscious, as were the partners, about a cliff age. So it enabled like a smooth transition to make sure that there was no gap. And each of the partners had their relevant list that they had built up, while, it was 500 people initially, but like everything, you want to try and get oversubscribed to avoid, that they kind of compensate for any drop-off. So the partners had a waiting list of 1 participant, so that was a positive.
Okay, thank you. Thanks,
Okay.
David.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, no other member has indicated they want to ask anything at this stage. Can I thank you? Sorry, Andy. Yes, go ahead.
I'll be succinct. Sharon, can I ask very quickly, were the intervention forum engaged at any point along the way in the development of the new programme? And also, can you advise how many of the participants directly engaged with the department in providing feedback in relation to the new programme? Also, can you provide a copy of the original tender document to ourselves?
Yeah, I think we've already agreed to give the tender documentation to yourself, Andy, or share it. Okay. With the current participants, we place reliance on the partners. We've asked on a number of occasions to be able to meet, but at times, again, because of sensitivities, it just hasn't been possible. The majority of our time in managing this project has been, completed during COVID, so I can't say that I have met the participants because I haven't. I've only met one group recently of the new cohort, and for the intervention forum I met them last February, and as I indicated earlier, it was a very useful meeting. They have been at meetings with the Minister, and again, that's where feedback has come through for the process.
Can you provide us copies of all the feedback you received in relation to, and apologies if I've already asked that, there was that many questions I asked, but I would think the department would want to get as much feedback from the WIC participants as they possibly can to help shape the wider programme.
Yeah, and again, Andy, that would be recorded through the case studies that we had tried to get through the delivery, programme. We had asked to meet with the forum, David, and actually the Director in Justice had an outstanding action point from November 20 to meet with the forum, but look, these things happen, and it just wasn't possible to make those arrangements. The feedback, I haven't got any formal feedback from the ladies apart from whenever they were attending the meetings. But I mean, I can surely ask the project promoter for further feedback if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I would like to hear that feedback of the programme.
Yeah. Again, Andy, that's all going to come through in the evaluation. You know, we were told when we were asking for the recommendations and the feedback, we were told, oh, that'll all come through in the evaluation. So that's where we're waiting on.
So you haven't received an extensive amount of feedback up to this point then?
We have feedback through the regular reports from the partners, and for any feedback that has been given verbally at the meetings that we had was the participants.
How many meetings was that? Was that the one meeting?
We had one meeting with me and another girl from another member of the team, and then there was 2 meetings with ministers, and then there was a meeting with David and the other grade 5.
So that was the height of the feedback that the department received on the WIC programme to help shape the new programme?
No, the feedback on each of the delivery partners on the 6 weekly checkpoint meetings, there's the opportunity to provide feedback in the case studies, and that's what we were using also.
Okay, thanks Sharon. Thanks Chair.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Sharon and David, for coming in front of us today. I know that there's a lot of information was shared there, and I know that you've committed to send us further information. So thank you and for your briefing today. Okay.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Bye. Bye. Okay, members, I'm going to propose we take a very short break just to prepare for the next witness session.
Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29.
This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 29. This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room.
Okay, moving on then to agenda item 8, which is the Charities Bill. Members, you've been provided with a copy of the bill at page 375 and the EFM at page 391 for reference for the upcoming briefing. At page 935 is a departmental response to questions highlighted by the raised paper on the bill. Members, any comment? Content to note that? Yes? Okay, members, you've been provided a page 407 for information from the Community Foundation on respondents to its survey in June 2020. Again, members, content to note that as well?
Agreed.
Okay, members, you've been provided a page 412 with a note from NFP Synergy on key facts and figures for charities in Northern Ireland. Again, content to note?
Agreed.
Yeah, members, in your table papers is a departmental response received on Tuesday regarding queries we raised in connection with Clause 2 following the evidence session on the 23rd of September. 2021, the response indicates that in responding to the court judgments, Minister Hargey sought to take a risk-based, proportionate and rights-focused approach, with the draft bill providing for a limited power of delegation to staff set out in the scheme of delegation to be consulted upon and agreed by the Department. The bill proposes that certain decisions would never be delegated to staff as they have the potential to have a highly significant impact on individuals such as trustees and have led to the vast majority of appeals to the Charity Tribunal. Response states that Clause 2 does not make it inevitable that all other decisions required of the Commission will be delegated to staff. With reference to the Revitalising Trust programme, the response states that no such programme currently exists in Northern Ireland, but that it is anticipated that the independent review of charity regulation, which is just completing, will make recommendations in this regard. Again, members, any comments or content to note? Go ahead,
It's just to say that it was brought up during the debate, but it's how much that the trustees, obviously they're very qualified staff who know what they're talking about, but it's when the staff are preparing the information for the commissioners, is that actually staff taking the decisions and it's just been rubber stamped? So that doesn't really get covered by what we've got.
Okay, well, that could go back and ask those questions as well. And it is actually good that the department are sending us back things so swiftly, because I think they know that the time pressures we're under as well. So thanks to the department for answering questions and anything. I know they're listening in to our witness sessions, so we want to thank them for getting back to us. Okay, members, we're going to then move on to agenda item 10, isn't that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Which is a briefing by the Ulster Society of Chartered Accountants, Charity Sector Specialist Groups on the Charities Bill. Members have been provided with a copy of this briefing paper at page 427. And then can I welcome Rosemary Peters-Gallagher, Niall Fitzgerald, Sam Snodden and Dee Moran. Rosemary, do you want to go ahead and start your presentation?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Your sound is coming out a wee bit on me now. I've been listening there and it was working okay. Shall I just go through the briefing paper briefly and then take any questions that you have for us at the end? Is that how you'd like me to proceed?
Yep, Rosemary, that's perfect.
Okay, well, you've already read out our names there, Chair. So I chair the Charity Not-for-Profit Sector of the Ulster Society of Chartered Accountants, and I would like to make it abundantly clear at this stage that we as a group are not representing the whole views of the full membership of the Ulster Society or of Chartered Accountants Ireland, but merely the views of the Charity Not-for-Profit Specialist Group. So just to make that clear at the start, because it's very difficult to represent the views of 12,000 members or whatever. Just a bit of background. Chartered Accountants Ireland is the leading professional accountancy body in Ireland, and we represent approximately 30,000 members around the world and are educating 97,000 students currently throughout the world. And, you know, obviously we want to be very much involved in this. We want to create opportunities for members and students to be involved in society and to give something back. And we have a particular interest in the charity and not-for-profit sector. The body was founded in 1888 and we have members in over 90 countries. We also play a key role in the Global Accounting Alliance, Accountancy Europe and the International Federation of Accountants. And then the Ulster Society, which obviously represents and speaks for members in the province of Ulster. We're a district society of Chartered Accountants Ireland. We represent about 5,000 members. And our own particular group then, the Charity Not-for-Profit Specialist Group, we've been set up for about 3 years now to be a voice and influencer for the sector, to encourage membership involvement. Many of our members are involved in the sector, and to support and develop members and to lobby for change within the sector and to try to help. So we particularly welcome being asked to give evidence this morning. We very much welcome the chance to address the proposals, as obviously the hiatus that currently exists has caused a lot of uncertainty within the sector and for our members, clients and other stakeholders. So we've reviewed the bill in some detail and will make the following high-level comments on a section-by-section basis, if that's okay. Clause 1 around the actions of committee staff treated as committee actions, so their actions being treated as committee actions, and in particular section 1, we obviously have a concern that there might be unintended consequences as a result of this broad provision. So we're wondering, could some consideration be given to making this more specific, perhaps by providing a schedule of appendices giving examples? It's just we have a slight concern that there could be problems in introducing retrospective legislation that might have unintended consequences for individuals or in respect of specific actions taken. And I know that one of your speakers previously alluded to this, and we understand the rationale behind this proposal, but we just think it needs a wee bit of careful thought. And I know we have also spoken with the independent review commissioners, and I know they will be looking at this as well. Moving on then to clause 1, section 5e, circumstances where deeming is restricted or excluded. We welcome this. They would seem to be quite fundamental powers and decisions. We just would query whether consideration has been given to extending these powers. For instance, section 34 should go further and perhaps empower the Commission, in addition to removing trustees and dealing with trustees, maybe also cross-referencing that if they're a director of a company. So enabling or empowering the Commission to make an application to suspend a person's ability to be a director of any company for up to whatever specified number of years, as well as removing them as a trustee, because our view was if they're a trustee and they're not fit to be a trustee, are they fit then to be a director of a limited company? Section 8A then around refreshed appeal rights. Will the Charity Commission contact impacted parties to advise them of this fresh right of appeal? And we have read the Charity Commission's written submission to yourselves, Madam Chairman, and we see that they hopefully would intend to do this, but we'd just like some comfort around that. Section 9A and B then, still in clause 1, this application of accounting and reporting requirements. We'd be grateful for a little more clarification in respect of this section. It does imply that a charity doesn't have to comply with accounts regulations, etc., in any year before it was registered. Therefore, it doesn't have to comply in respect of any financial year beginning before the 1st of April 2022. And I know that the Charity Commission also have commented on this. This could have an impact on transparency and public confidence if a significant number of charities choose not to submit accounts and returns voluntarily during the hiatus period. And obviously that applies particularly to unincorporated charities, as at least limited companies have to file something with Companies House. But we just think, we as much as yourselves and the Commission are concerned about public confidence in the sector. Moving on to clause 2 then, the power of Commission to delegate to staff and the powers of functions by staff. We note that some matters will be reserved for the board going forward, and we welcome this very much. And we are sure that good governance practices will apply. We would like some clarity as to how the department, in exercising its powers, could insist on delegating those powers to staff at a later date, and would parameters be set around those actions? We think that would be very important. Section 16A then, the power to set thresholds for exemption from registration in clause 2. And again, whilst we understand the thinking behind this, we are very much of the view that registration brings a degree of accountability and transparency to the sector, which instills public confidence. And we're also of the view that any organisation which wants to hold itself out as a charity should be registered. However, consideration could perhaps be given to different accounting and reporting tiers. And we appreciate that there are already different accounting tiers and reporting requirements. But we just think we're not keen on the idea of exemption from registration. And we know this applies in other jurisdictions, but we think for transparency, public confidence within Northern Ireland, that some degree of registration should be required for an organisation that wants to call itself a charity. And we'd welcome a consultation process around this, and we know this is something that the independent review are also looking at. And we would also agree with the proposal that perhaps the definite or assets could be looked at and not just income when coming up with the definition of the tiers. And obviously, as a professional accountancy body, we can contribute to any further discussions and would be very, very happy to participate and involve our members. Section 16A4 then, the word certify appears, and that always scares accountants and auditors. And we would seek further clarification on certification and by whom in this case. The term certified implies a level of certainty and accuracy which would never be given in this context by an auditor or an accountant. And it's not consistent with wording in any auditing or assurance framework under which auditors and accountants conduct their work. But perhaps there could be an alternative wording that could be used, or a level of work undertaken that would meet the requirements of the regulator and enable the accountant, auditor, independent examiner to provide a report that is compliant with the relevant framework, and we would obviously be very happy to provide input if necessary. And then our final comment, charity is exempted under Section 16A information, Section 16C2. We think it would be helpful to have some clarity around the terms charity, exempt charity and registered charity to avoid confusion amongst the public, if you like, and the sector when it comes to determining compliance. And finally, we would also have a concern around the potential removal of charities from a register if thresholds are changed. How would that work in practice and how would it be dealt with? And that's our submission, a quick run through, Chair, but we're very happy to take any questions or give clarification.
Rosemary, thank you very much for briefing us or going over your brief with us today. I just have a few questions. Can I ask members to indicate if they want to ask questions as well? I just want to go back then to clause 1 regarding the retrospective nature of the law, and just ask what consequences can you envisage for certain past decisions?
Yeah, well, I suppose we don't know because we're not too sure what it will mean. But we're just always concerned about retrospective legislation for obvious reasons. I don't know if anyone else, I think Niall had a comment on this perhaps. Not sure if you can hear me.
Yeah, Rosemary, I can hear you, yes. No, the retrospective legislation, we don't know what the consequences might be. There might have been a decision taken in the past that was unlawful, and it was unlawful even if these regulations applied. And with this legislation, would that suddenly make that unlawful decision lawful? So just to have a bit further thought to the consequences of retrospective legislation, I think the solution we were talking about as a group was to propose that it's very limited circumstances in which decisions have been made by staff instead of the board of the commission, if you like, that perhaps they can be specified in an appendix and that the retrospective can apply in relation to that appendix. And that could just kind of be a safety net, if you like, to safeguard against any unintended consequences.
Okay, thanks, Niall, for that. Can I just ask you then around clause 2? We know that there have been issues have been raised about the delegating of powers and the powers that the department will have as well. Just if you wouldn't mind just expanding on your concerns around that also.
Okay, well I mean we welcome it, and I think it's to get some clarity, I suppose, as to who is responsible for what. So you know, what are staff responsible for, what are commissioners or the charity responsible for, and what is the department responsible for? And I think it's not altogether clear in 9A2. And it's really just to see, you know, obviously the more will come on this, but we're just a wee bit concerned, you know, around past decisions perhaps even, and just where we will, you know, where they stand, and, you know, are we happy for staff to have certain powers and not others? Will these be changed? How will they be changed? What's the process? What's the process for the department stepping in, if you like? It's just some clarity around that, and I'm sure that there will be guidance and consultation around this before it becomes law, if you like.
Well, thanks for that, Rosemary. I suppose, I mean, any information you can give us or anything that you, the concerns that you have, and certainly there's plenty in your brief here, will go some way, as all of our evidence sessions will go some way to the committee forming whether they need to have amendments put down, whether they need to have something put in the committee's final report of recommendations. So anything at all that you've told us certainly will go some way. I just want to finally ask you on the very last point that you had made there about the charity, about the clarity around the terms charity, an exempt charity and a registered charity. What would you suggest that should be, what would you suggest that the wording around that should be, or what we should look at?
Well, I think it's really just some clarity and perhaps a definition, because the terms are used, you know, throughout the bill and throughout the guidance and so on, and it's more, I suppose, for the general public, if you like, you know, defining then what is an exempt charity, what is a charity, and what is a registered charity. And I think a lot of this will also depend, Chair, on what happens around the thresholds for registration as well. That could have an impact.
No, look, thanks for that, Rosemary. Members, any questions that they want to ask Kelly?
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much, Rosemary and Niall. Actually, it just feeds on very well to what I was going to ask you about this thresholds. We're hearing evidence that all charities should be registered, but as you have said, the level of accountability or disapplication of accounts could be variable. I'm just thinking, you guys are accountants, what would, you know, I'm just thinking about the level of, you know, do we pick 5,000? Do we pick 25,000? What would be a reasonable amount to say, okay, then you're a registered charity, but you don't have to comply? Is it the levels that we currently have, or have you guys as accountants got something that you would suggest?
Well, certainly might ask that. So it's a very difficult one to answer through the Chair. As I said earlier, we think that all organisations holding themselves out to be charities should be registered, and I know there's a great bodies being vocal about the fact that there should be de minimis limits, as there are in other jurisdictions. We take the view that they all should be registered, but maybe a lighter touch for some of them. But I think, again, to instill public confidence, because there are a number of charities, we just go by income levels, that have very little income but a huge assets, and vice versa. So I think that's important. I think perhaps, I know what they do in other jurisdictions, if you leave out the sort of exemption piece, that they have a lighter touch when it comes to reporting, and the thresholds that you have at the minute around receipts and payments accounts, accruals accounts, audit, independent examination isn't too bad. But there's some very small charities out there, small organisations that, you know, maybe 10, 15, 20,000 of income, who struggle perhaps to have a full trustees report, if you like, and go through that whole gamut of reporting. So perhaps something more light touch could be involved there. We'd be very happy to maybe put something to you, or to be involved in consultation on that, because it's you can't just have a broad brush approach to it. So we'll be keen to do that. I think it's important maybe to look. I know we've looked at the thresholds in other jurisdictions. Obviously, 500,000 sounds like a lot of money, but I know we've come across organisations where they maybe get, say for instance, a charity that's in receipt of donations or bequests, and they get one huge donation one year, puts them right over the limit and into the audit threshold. So they have to go all the expense of having an audit, have their comparative figures audited, have the next year audited, and all that entails just because they got lucky one year and got a big donation or a big bequest or a big gift. Obviously bequests aren't included, but a big gift or a big donation. So that causes difficulty. The Charity Commission do have the authority, or they did have, to use their discretion, but the experiences we have had is that if they exceed the limit, they exceed the limit, and then they must have an audit or whatever. So that's sort of the level of thing we're thinking about through the chair.
And can I ask then, you've talked about, and to be honest, I worked with charities that would have had huge level of assets. Like, for instance, you could have social housing, like the value of homes. You can have transport companies where the value of their buses or whatever it may be. I'm just wondering, how do we protect those organisations through accountancy to make sure that, say, a funder doesn't turn around and say, well, their reserve level must be, £1 million, but actually that £1 million is not cash. They can't get their hands on the cash easily. It's because they have a building or they have a huge asset, that just happens to have value attached to it. What would you say on that one?
And how do you mean protect them through the charity? From registration or?
Well, it's part of this threshold for the accountancy, so if we're saying that everyone is registered, but there may be a threshold for the light touch, but their assets are worth a clean fortune, but they're not cash assets, it's a known liability that's there on their books. Would that be treated separately?
Well, at the minute, it's based on income. So if their income is below the 500,000, they don't need an audit, but they could have a lot of assets. I think if it gets beyond a certain level, it depends on the level of assets that will be stipulated. So that's why I think there's going to be a lot of consultation required here under this section 16A1, because it's very hard. Once you set a threshold, it's very difficult to set a threshold because there will obviously be organisations that it impacts upon that you didn't mean it to impact upon, but unfortunately that's the way it is. But I think if there was some sort of balance between income and assets, and I think just because funds are involved in assets and not in cash, it's still important that the public has confidence that those assets are being used for charitable purposes and have been purchased for charitable purposes.
Yeah, no, absolutely, I agree.
Nodding his head there. I don't know if he wants to add to that. But.
Yeah, if I may, Rosemary, thank you through the chair. It's a very good question as to what thresholds you define for a company or a charity to have an audit or not have an audit, to prepare accounts, not prepare accounts, to do receipts and payments, to do accruals, and all of this. We have to remember what the purpose of the charity is, and there's a lot of different charities out there. You used the example of social housing. So I'd ask, what is the benefit of a charity with social housing having £1 million sitting in reserves? They have assets sitting bricks and mortar, but they cannot access to sell those assets, to realise the funds, dissolves the purpose of the charity because they can no longer provide social housing because they've sold their assets. So what is the purpose of the reserve policy? The purpose of the reserve policy is to help it with its going concern, that if funding dried up, that they'd be able to survive for 2 or 3 months or 4 or 5 months, whatever time period you define, so that they can pay the salaries and pay the overheads. That's what the reserve policy would be for on a going concern basis. Or do you want a kind of sinking fund reserve policy for maintaining the houses? So it's kind of, you have to think, rather than a broad threshold set in law and everybody has to comply with this, it's better to have that somewhat flexible, that there's a number of criteria that they have to comply with, and they can pick the most relevant criteria and then apply that for determining reserve policies, whether to prepare accounts, etc. That's kind of what I contribute on that.
Niall, be still my heart, you're a man after my own. Because for years I've worked on reserve policies and known liabilities and unknown liabilities and what you should consider as surplus and what's not surplus. No, thank you very much for that. It's an interesting part of this legislation that we're going to have to make sure we get right for charities. Thank you.
Thank you,
and Kelly, if I may also add that a lot of charities need to access those reserves in times of hardship, such as COVID-19 that we've just been through. So maintaining the reserve policy becomes more difficult in times of hardship, and that's when they need the reserves most. So there needs to be a flexibility around it.
Yeah. I think maybe if I could add through the chair, I mean, what Niall says is right, and we come across this all the time, that funders expect to see reserves, but it's getting the balance as well, because if they see too much, then they say, well, you don't need the funding. So it's trying to get that balance and educating the funders and hopefully getting some protections through this legislation to do that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. I have Paul and then Fra. So Paul.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much for your presentation. Please treat me like an idiot, like I am for a start. I'm only on the committee two sessions, so please treat me as an idiot with regards to the knowledge of this. Can I, and hence my next question, can I ask you, what is your understanding of Clause 1, subsection 5? What does Clause 1, subsection 5 do?
Bear with me here. Well, our understanding, I suppose, of Clause 1, subsection 5 is really what I said at the start, in that, this will ratify anything that has happened before the 16th of May. Yeah. And that's why we were saying we want to be careful that, anything that was unlawful then could now be deemed to be lawful because it's retrospective, and that was our concern. Now, we're not legal experts, but that's our reading of it.
So we've heard evidence even just today that they're questioning whether subsection 5 should be there at all. So I suppose to flip that question on its head, if that subsection was omitted, what impact does that have?
Well, we need to think about that.
I suspect it all hinges on Clause 1, subsection 2.
It does.
So again, I'm trying to work out in my primitive head just what it actually means for that to either stay in or be omitted. And why I ask that is because most of my other questions are based around this clause. In subsection 5e, the making or purporting making of an order purporting to be under any of section 33 or 36 of the 2008 Act. So when I look at the 2008 Act, there is a wide range of powers there. And I suppose a question I pose then is, well, why are they only going 33 to 36? 37, clause 37 of the 2008 Act talks about the power to direct application of charity properties. So I suppose a question, if you're going to lump 33 to 36 in to this bill, this fresh bill, would you have any idea as to why they wouldn't insert 37 also, the power to direct application of charitable property?
I could just offer an insight there, and the first might be, always beware of the person who says they don't have a clue, because they always ask the most interesting questions. We actually had a look at that, and actually I totally concur with you. We looked at sections 33 to 36, and I have it on my screen. As I look to my left, I'm looking at another screen. So these are the powers to act for protection of trustees, the power to suspend or remove trustees from a membership of a charity, supplementary provisions, etc. Okay, they're pretty fundamental powers of decisions, and the question we raise, are these to no longer be considered lawful as a consequence of the proposal? And again, this is that we're not lawyers, so it can be difficult to interpret legislation. We don't always get it right. So that's why we would ourselves consult with lawyers in this situation. But is it that subsection 2 is saying every decision made by the Commission is to be seen as is seen to be lawful, with the exception of these exclusions? And these exclusions are determined in some other way. So, for example, these other powers, I presume there will have been court cases and decisions made, and the court decisions will stand. That's just my, like yourself, very kind of innocent interpretation of what that might be saying.
So if your interpretation is correct, and we're probably on the same page, is there a need to even cite it in this bill? Because obviously it's the court that will develop the caseload and the law going forward. And if it shouldn't be cited in this bill, then is it causing unintended consequences by naming it and having it in this bill? I suppose one thing you do point out in your evidence is you basically question the existing clause 34 in the 2008 Act. with regards to excluding trustee. I think I'm reading your presentation right in saying, well, that should be extended to cover directorships. Now, so you're going one step ahead. You know, you're saying that 34 should be enhanced or made greater in this piece.
Yeah.
Now, I can get where you're coming from, but then if I don't have the basic understanding of why subsection 5 is there in the first place, I don't know what enhancing sections 34 of the existing act, what that actually does if we enhance that to directorships, and whether we need a separate clause altogether that would strengthen the old existing section 34 in the old act. See what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
We might need a standalone clause that actually strengthens that, renews it, enhances it to include directorship as opposed to just trustee. And
It's something that would require clarity.
Yeah, I mean, through the chair, as I was going to say, we too struggle with this because there's a lot of negatives and double negatives. And I think we were just trying to say, well, if this is going to be included, here's what we think. But we would certainly welcome clarity too. So, as Niall said, as the person who says they don't understand usually does understand.
Then on the other aspect with regards to refreshed appeal rights and the time duration for time limit for appeals, it's down, cited on this bill as 42 days. Most of the evidence I think we've gleaned from people saying that's too short a period. I mustn't have caught it, but do you have an opinion on that?
I think, through the chair, I think it's currently, the appeal rights are currently 42 days.
Yes.
If you want to make an appeal against a decision, I think this is just being refreshed, and I think we were just querying, will the impacted parties be informed of this?
So you're saying it's all about notification for you, the concerns. Do you have a concern about that time duration? Do you think that time duration of 42 days should be extended to for instance,
well, I mean, again, we're only speaking for our group and not the whole institute, but yes, it probably would help if it was extended, but I know it has been 42 days, under the current Act and regulations, so people seem to have managed with that. Certainly if it could be a bit longer, yes, but it was more the fact that everyone would be made aware, because we want to make sure that everybody within the sector is aware of what's happening, and those that are impacted would be informed directly and not left to find out for themselves, really.
So if I'm right, you're saying as long as people are notified in good time, 42 days has been sufficient up to now.
As far as we know.
Yes, as far as you know, of course. Do you know if by extending that to say 3 calendar months, what ramifications that could well have for the actual working practices, both in the Commission and with charities? Is that something that keeps you up at night, or is it something that's mute?
Sorry, I missed that last wee bit.
So if we were to extend that 42-day time duration to 3 months,
yes.
Do you know off the top of your head whether that would have any ramifications for work processes, either in the Commission or with charities?
Yeah. Well, I couldn't speak for the Commission, obviously, but I know they're always saying they're under-resourced and short-staffed. I think for charities a little bit longer might help, but I'm not aware that it has been an issue in the past. Our concern was more around notification and keeping everybody informed as to what's happening. Okay,
thank you very much. Thanks for your time.
No problem.
Thank you, Paul. Fra?
Sure, Paul said exactly what I was going to say. They keep me going there. No, I think there's just 2 points that I'd like to, and one of it's in the reserves. And I know that that's been an argument, the debate has went on for quite a while, and even in terms of social housing, that there's a lot of reasons why some housing associations have to have sizable reserves, and that is if they want to develop a 10-year strategy, a 25-year strategy, that is to do with the condition of their stock. So it's crucial that that is recognised, and I suppose you're trying to find a happy medium there that allows you to deal with it, because on the other you get groups that have been accused of storing up their reserves without investing it in what the charity is in the first place. So I think I have to do it. The other point, and for many people, and especially many small groups, and some of them may be only 5,000 or 10,000, but the charity status number is everything to them and opens up doors that may not open in anything. So I would be careful about even categorising them as different because unless you actually have it built in that it can't be touched, they could fall prey of bigger organisations or the Charity Commission itself.
Okay, thanks, Brad. Okay, any other members want to ask anything at this stage? No, there's not.
Yeah,
oh, sorry. Oh, dear. Oh, no. Paul's coming back in again.
You were going to say what I was going to say.
I was just going to echo what Brad said. So, clause 2, I'll throw you this one out again. I don't know if you have an answer to this, but clause 2, subsection 3, the department may make a scheme describing, and it goes on to subsection A and B with regards to delegations and delegations under subsections. But it's been said today that should read, the Commission may make a scheme describing, as opposed to having the Department have that power. Do you have any angle on that? Any view on that? Whether that should read, so it's clause 2, subsection 3, it reads at the minute the Department may make a scheme.
Yeah, no, well, I suppose we haven't included it in our brief and our submission, but you're saying, why is it the Department and not the Commission? I suppose, I mean, anything you read from the Department, they're always stating that they will basically act upon what they're told. The Act is there and they carry out their instructions under the auspices of the Act and the sponsoring department. And just from my knowledge of the public sector and working with the charity sector, it's usually the sponsoring department that sets up the scheme, which then the body follows. But I take your point, we don't have any strong views. I don't think any of the rest of the members here have any strong views on that. But we're used to seeing schemes set up by sponsoring departments for the body, and then the body implements that.
Yeah. And then of course...
Come in.
Yes, Sam, go ahead.
No, just in terms of schemes of delegation, they are useful to stop a board delegating something to a staff that the department wouldn't be happy with. But the department should set the powers as to who can produce the scheme and what parameters will it be limited to.
Okay, and I suppose that falls on to my next question then in clause 2 with regards 9. Clause 2, subsection 2, the following may not be delegated under subparagraph 1, and that includes then the sections 33 to 36 again, which is going back to my previous question. Again, what's your understanding of that, and why should the Commission not have those delegated powers?
Sorry, I couldn't quite hear. You're asking why the Commission shouldn't have delegated powers?
It says here in clause 2, the power of Commission to delegate to staff. Clause 2, subsection 2 says the following may not be delegated under subparagraph 1, and that's the instituting of an inquiry, the making of a decision, that a report or statement be published, the making of an order under any of the sections of 33, 36 we've already talked about in the previous Act, the making of regulations and exercise of power conferred by the statutory provision. So I suppose maybe you don't have a view on this, and that's fine, but I'm just asking, teasing out, why shouldn't the Commission have those powers where they could delegate the staff?
Why shouldn't they, or why should they, sorry?
Why shouldn't they have?
Well, I think, yes, we do have a view on this, we did talk about it, and our view was that there are some matters, such as instituting inquiries and so on, that can have huge ramifications for charities and their reputation and so on, that perhaps delegating those to staff is not appropriate, and I think we agreed with that. I don't know if colleagues want to disagree with me, but I think we thought there are some matters that really should be decided by the commissioners themselves rather than members of staff.
Okay, that's perfect. Anybody else want to come in on that, or are you fine with that?
I think we're fine with that. Have you anything further you want to ask?
That's me finished. Thank you.
Okay. Look, thank you. No other member has said that they want to ask any further questions. So Rosemary, Niles, Sam D, and I forgot to mention Gareth as well, who's on the call. Thank you for your time today. It certainly will help us whenever we're forming any amendments or our final report. So thanks for being with us.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Commissioner, thank you, committee. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Okay, members, we're going to move on then to agenda item 11, which is a departmental briefing on SL1, the Social Security Amendment EU Exit Regulations, Northern Ireland 2021. You'll find this SL1 at page 431 of your meeting packs, and I think this is the one that Mark had asked for more information on last week. Am I correct? Yep. So can I welcome to the meeting Anne McCleary, Michelle Grills, and Karen Kempton. Now let me see. Yep, these are all there. Anne, I haven't seen you in a while, so it's great to have you back in with us.
I was just about to say that. Yeah.
Good to see you.
I met Kelly yesterday, so she's had the pleasure of seeing me face to face. So yeah.
No, well, I'm so glad to have you all back in with us again. So Anne, if you want to go ahead and see your brief.
Thanks very much. Can I just mention that I don't know if it's me or not, but I'm struggling to hear the committee just at the minute, so just in case somebody can do something about it. I can just catch you, but just so that you know. Again, thank you for allowing us to come along to explain some of this. Actually, my notes already said it's been a while, and I know that obviously there have been some changes to membership since I was last here. So if I can, I'll begin by introducing myself. I'm Anne McCleary. I'm the Director of Social Security Policy, Legislation and Decision Making in the Department. And my colleagues here today are Karen Kempton and Michelle Grills, and they are the ones who have the expert knowledge of this. So I may be deferring to them if you've got questions, but we'll see. If I can start by explaining the background to this. The Treasury and Department for Work and Pensions jointly made a statutory instrument that amends the Social Security Immigration and Asylum Regulations to clarify entitlement to Social Security benefits, child benefit and child tax credit. These changes will ensure that following EU exit, benefit entitlement aligns with the new immigration system and reflects agreements or the absence of agreements with other countries going forward from EU exit. So it's important to stress this is about alignment. The amendments to tax credit and child benefit legislation applied to Britain and NI. However, the amendments to Social Security legislation do not extend here. The Department for Communities therefore proposes to make a statutory rule under powers conferred by the Immigration and Asylum Act 1999. The Social Security Amendment EU Exit Regulations Northern Ireland 2021, there's a mouthful for you, amend the Social Security, Immigration and Asylum Consequential Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2000. These are the 2000 regulations, to ensure that they operate in line with the new immigration system and to take account of the fact that EU association agreements no longer apply to the UK following EU exit. Under the new immigration system, EEA migrants arriving from the 1st of January 2021 are treated in the same way as migrants from elsewhere in the world. This means that they are classified as person subject to immigration control and therefore will typically have no recourse to public funds for 5 years. However, it has come to light that current domestic law could allow nationals of 25 EEA member states, which are signatories to the European Convention on Social and Medical Assistance, referred to as the ECSMA, and the 1961 European Social Charter, the ESC, to claim universal credit, despite the no recourse to public funds condition. So this is at odds with immigration policy. Current domestic legislation allows persons subject to immigration control from those ECMA and ESC countries to access certain benefits, including universal credit. This legislation did not apply to EEA citizens coming to the UK before EU exit, as they were not classified as persons subject to immigration control. The change in immigration status under the new immigration system interacts with the domestic legislation in a totally unintended way. The Westminster Government, as signatory to the treaties, is of the view that UC does not fall within the definition of social assistance for the purposes of the UK's compliance with ECSMA and ESC. Therefore, the current exception in domestic law allowing ESCMA and ESC nationals to access UC is not required by the treaties. It's therefore proposed to amend the 2000 regulations, that's the Northern Ireland regulations, to ensure that nationals from the member states and Turkey and North Macedonia, who are signatories to this ECSMA ESC, are not able to access universal credit by virtue of the UK being a signatory to the treaties. Otherwise, EEA migrants would be treated more advantageously than migrants from the rest of the world. That's a key point here. And this would be in contravention of immigration policy, which, as you'll all be aware, is an accepted matter. The rights of Irish citizens are not impacted by these regulations. The reciprocal agreement signed with Ireland in February 2019 to support the common travel area arrangements means that social security rights of Irish citizens coming from the south continue unchanged following EU exit. Move on to the other aspect of this. The EU has association agreements called AAs with a number of EU countries to which the UK was party as an EU member. These AAs primarily cover trade issues, but the agreements with some countries also provide for equal treatment in social security for workers from those countries in the UK. The equal treatment provisions mean that the UK has to pay certain non-contributory benefits to nationals of these countries who are working here before the end of the transition period. This is the case even where their immigration status normally means they have no recourse to public funds, and this is provided for in the 2000 regulations. Ahead of the end of the transition period, the Westminster Government had begun the process of transitioning the EU AAs, these are these agreements, into bilateral trade agreements and, following collective agreement, to reproduce the arrangements in them. This included, where appropriate, replicating the social security equal treatment provisions in the transitioned agreements. Some agreements were transitioned and took effect from the end of the transition period. The 2000 regulations were amended to ensure access to benefits resulting from equal treatment provisions continues for nationals from these countries. However, other EU agreements have not yet been transitioned and are unlikely to be transitioned until later this year, if at all, as negotiations are ongoing. This means that these AAs ceased to apply here at the end of the transition period. It's proposed, therefore, to amend the 2000 regulations to make clear that nationals of countries where the AA has not been transitioned will not be able to access the relevant benefits. And we would intend that these regulations will be made as soon as possible. Now, if these regulations are not made, parity in social security will be broken with Britain. Based on a DWP read across, failure to make the regulations would result in average additional costs here of about £700,000 a year. This is based on the DWP estimated total savings of £70 million to 2024-25, which equates to £2.8 million here until the same year, or 700,000 per year on average. By 2025-26, it is estimated that these costs could exceed £1.4 million per year. As this is a break in parity, these costs would fall to the block. But, however, this doesn't take account of potential unintended consequences. For example, EEA migrants moving from England, Scotland or Wales to access universal credit here. There's also a risk of repercussive costs from breaking parity, including potential costs if a case were to be taken against the Westminster Government. In that case, the Westminster Government would be left vulnerable, and where there is a public law duty to treat like cases alike. And this would not be the case where an EEA citizen in identical circumstances would be eligible for universal credit here, but not in Britain. You're well familiar with me talking about people in Newcastle, County Down, being treated in the same way as people from Newcastle and Tyne. That's the kind of situation we're talking about. If such a challenge were made against the Westminster Government, and if they were to lose it, the issue of repercussive costs would come into play. This would put the executive at risk of paying significant costs in addition to the average £700,000 originally estimated. The risk of this scenario and the reaction of Treasury to such a situation are very difficult to gauge. However, the potential risks can't be ignored, particularly given the challenging funding situation which seems likely in the coming years. There would also be the risk of challenge from migrants from other countries if special arrangements continue to apply to, for example, EEA migrants without any underlying treaty to support such special treatment. As the committee are aware, the Minister did have serious reservations about these proposals, and the matter was referred to the Executive. But the Executive agreed that this rule should be made. Now, we're happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Anne. That was very detailed. I know I don't have any questions at this point. Can I just ask members, have they any questions? I don't know if Mark, yep, Mark, come on ahead. There we go.
Thank you, Leanne, Karen and Michelle. Thanks for coming in and going through that with us or for us. I think it's important that you did. It's a significant regulation here that we're discussing, and that's why I'd asked for a bit more detail in terms of the implications of it and what it actually does. Now, speaking personally or even from a party political perspective, I have great difficulty with it, and I appreciate there, and you've outlined and the Minister did and does as well. Just a couple of wee questions. Well, I've had to scribble them out because you've been addressing them.
Oh, good. That's what I like. That's what I like to hear, Mark.
So around the no recourse to public funds for the first 5 years, okay. And there was a wee bit there in the paper, and it says, that if he hadn't claimed the benefit before regulations came into place, then you'd be knocked out. But what if he had been here for fewer than 5 years, have never claimed the benefit, but then the regulations come into place? So say you've been here 3 years from one of these states, and you've been working, you've had no reason whatsoever to go near or seek universal credit or support, then you'd lose your job just on the day after the regulations come into place. So you won't have been here the 5 years, but you'll have never claimed, although you will have been here and paid tax. Would they be eligible?
I think the first thing in that situation, and I'm sure Michelle and Karen will correct me if I'm wrong, but the key date here is what you were is the Brexit date. It's not necessarily the date of the regs.
I think sorry, just if I can come in there, the point would be maybe, Mark, that the starting point here is a person subject to immigration control. So an EEA national, for example, who was already here before the 31st of December wouldn't be such a person and wouldn't need to avail of these exceptions. So in such cases, they wouldn't be barred. If you like, from claiming universal credit. Does that answer your question in any way, Mark?
Yeah, provided they were here before that.
Yes, yes.
Okay, right. Okay.
So this will quite simply align the position. Anybody coming here from after the 1st of January will be aware of the new immigration policy, if you like, and what they're signing up to, cruel as it might sound. But the people that are already here aren't persons subject to immigration control in the first instance, and therefore they're fine in that regard.
Okay, no, thank you, Karen. And one other wee one, and it was just in terms of the estimated cost, and I know there's a few grey areas there in terms of what the Treasury doing that. But it was just interesting because in terms of the estimated cost currently being around 700,000 and how that might rise, how it might double, in fact, within the next few years. I was just wondering what the estimation was kind of based on, how
it was as I think I said, it's based on a read across from the figures that DWP had. Now it's an average, and it's important to be aware of that. It is an average over that 3-year period, but it's based on the GB. It's based on the DWP figures.
Maybe they're going to double the amount of universal credit they pay.
Who knows? Who knows? Your guess is as good as mine.
I doubt it, no, but not huge for that, ladies. Thanks.
Okay. No other members have indicated they want to ask anything further. So can I
just ask?
Oh,
sorry, Chair.
You're all right. Go ahead.
25 EEA member states. Who's missing off that list? Or who's already included?
I'm going to refer to Carol and Michelle.
I don't have my list to hand here. I did have a list at one stage printed out. We could certainly provide that information, but Michelle, do you know off the top of your head?
No, again, I've looked at the list, but I don't have it printed off here, so we'll have to come back.
That's a question we didn't anticipate.
It was never really a factor, I guess, because again, coming back to what I said earlier, if you're an EA national, all EA member states, you weren't a person subject to immigration control and therefore didn't need to avail of these exceptions anyway, so we didn't pay too much attention to that, I have to confess.
Yeah, no problem. Sorry.
Okay, all right, that's us. Thank you very much, Michelle and Karen. Good to see you, Anne.
Nice to see you too, guys.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, folks.
See you soon.
Thank you.
Bye. Okay, members,
Bye.
can I then...
Bye.
Bye. Can I ask then, our members agreed that the department proceed to make this rule? Agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. All right, we're going to move on to agenda item 12, which is SR 2021-261, the Pensions Regulator Employer Resources Test Regulations, Northern Ireland 2021. Members should find a copy of the rule at page 438. Can I ask members, have you any objections to the rule? No. No objections. Then I'll put the following, that the Committee for Communities has considered SR 2021-261, the Pensions Regulator Employer Resources Test Regulations Northern Ireland 2021, and recommends that it is confirmed by the Assembly. We'll move on to agenda item 13, SR 2021-267, the Social Security Benefits Claims and Payments Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2021. You'll find a copy of this rule at page 447. Can I then ask our members any objections to the rule? No objections, folks?
No.
Okay, then I'll put the following, that the Committee for Communities has considered SR 2021-267, the Social Security Benefits Claims and Payments Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2021, and subject to the Examiner of Statutory Rules report, has no objections to the rule. Moving on then to agenda item 14, which is SR 2021-269, the Social Security Habitual Residence and Past Presence Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2021. You'll find this rule at page 456 of your pack. Can I ask, have members any objections to this rule?
No.
Nope. Okay, thank you. Then I'll put the following, that the Committee for Communities has considered SR 269, the Social Security Habitual Residence and Past Presence Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2021, and subject to the Examiner's Statutory Rules report, has no objections to the rule. Members, will move on to agenda item 15 then, which is correspondence. You'll find your correspondence memo at page 469. Can I draw your attention to the joint letter at page 471 from Save the Children, Action on Children and National Children's Bureau requesting to brief the committee on child poverty? Members, can I ask, do we wish to receive a formal briefing from these groups, or invite them to a stakeholder event at some point in the future when we are further on with the bills? It's up to members.
Stakeholder.
A stakeholder. Would members agree with if we hold a stakeholder event on that? Okay, thank you, members. I have nothing further I want to bring up under correspondence. Can I ask if members anything they want to bring up under correspondence? Speak now. Can we let Mark in, Antoinette, as well, just so he's in the audience or in the spotlight? Okay, members, anything else under correspondence? No? Okay, then can I then ask our members content to action the correspondence as set out in the memo?
Yep.
Agreed? Okay.
Great.
Moving forward then, agenda item 16, which is our forward work programme. Members, at next week's meeting, we will be briefed by the department on the October monitoring round and by 2 individuals in the Charities bill. So then I'll move on then to agenda item 17, which is any other business. Can I ask any other business, Kelly?
Could we write to the Northern Ireland Housing Executive Board to get an update on their discussions on the leasehold issue? There have been a number of people struggling to sell their homes due to the number of years left on leaseholds, and I know that the Housing Executive Board are supposed to be discussing that at a meeting, but we haven't had an update on that. And if we could also write to the department for an update on the Shared Prosperity Fund.
Okay. We can certainly do that. I know that the leasehold issue was something that we did look at through the letters had been sent from this committee, but that was maybe a year ago, and that was done. And I know certainly I've the same. I have constituents in my own area that this is causing, especially when it comes to flats and apartments, causing great problems for them to try and sell on when there's so few years left on the leasehold. Any other business members want to bring up? Nope. Okay. Then I propose we move on to agenda item 18, which is date, time and location of our next meeting. Members, our next meeting will take place in this room, room 29, next Thursday, the 7th of October at 9 AM. Thank you, members.
Committee room 29.